committee. Just before we move on to the items in your pack, I'll just ask Andrew if there are a note of apologies or substitutions.
Yes, convener. Substitution is Councillor McGowan has been substituted today by Councillor McGregor, and apologies received from Councillors Anderson, Fannin, and also from William Cunningham.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Are there any further apologies? No? Okay, that takes us on to agenda item number 1 on your agenda, which is declarations of interest in terms of ethical standards in public life. Does anyone have anything to declare? Councillor London?
Thanks so much, convener. Agenda items 8 and 9 by virtue of my membership of the North Lanarkshire Care Experience Champions Board, and I don't consider it prohibits me from participating, convener.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
Chair, can I put a declaration of interest in on agenda item 3, page 33, as chair of the Children's Services Partnership Board, and I'm also on the IJB. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Watson. Councillor McManus?
Agenda item 11, Chair, as a member of, as an employee of Clubface, Medview and NL2.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Councillor London, have you come back in again?
Apologies, convener. Similarly, Councillor Watson reminds me of my membership of the Children's Services Partnership Board, and insofar as the IGB is concerned, I know there's a general exemption, so it's worth noting, but nonetheless I'll continue to participate. Thanks, convener.
Okay, thanks for that, Jordan. I don't see any further declarations of interest, so that takes us on, colleagues, to agenda item number 2, which is our regular update on the expansion of early learning and childcare in North Lanarkshire, 1,140 hours. I'm sure you'll agree, colleagues, it's a very welcome report. It shows the incredible progress that's been made here in North Lanarkshire to deliver this important initiative, and certainly all credit goes to our early years team and the officers within enterprise and communities who have worked diligently along with our partners to make that a reality. Gerard McLaughlin, as usual, will take us through some of the main points within the report, but in advance of that, he has a short video which he's going to play at this point, and following that, and a few points from Gerard, will open up to questions. Gerard?
Thanks, convener. So, as you've just said, the early years team have pulled together a short presentation to show the committee the achievements of the 1140 team to date. This presentation illustrates our new buildings and adaptations and the offer, most importantly, being provided to children and families in North Lanarkshire. And we're going to play that video now. Thanks very much, Andrew. Thanks, convener. So hopefully that short presentation gives you an overview for those people who have not been able to, certainly from a committee perspective, to get out to see the fabulous new centres and adaptations that we've been able to provide. I probably just want to highlight just a few things in the committee this afternoon with regards to the report. Certainly under section 2 of the infrastructure, you can see, just as you see in the video, the 6 family learning centres, the 7 early learning childcare adaptations, and the 77 settings now benefiting from minor adaptations. Obviously, our focus now to finish off the programme is Cumbernauld Village, Forgewood and Heathery Park. And you can see from the report, Cumbernauld Village and Forgewood, we're hoping will be completed of November, towards the end of November of this year. And Heathery Park would be July 22. And you can see within the report the actual drawings for that. From a workforce perspective, table 3 and 4, section 2.2 of the report illustrates the progress made to date. There's a significant number of applicants for the posts that we've been advertising, which is absolutely amazing news. In some cases, for the recent NLC 4 and 7 posts, there's been 400 applicants. Under 2.3 of the report, you can see the fact that our big focus now has been on the quality. And certainly you can see within section 2.3.6 of the report, those people who have been attending in the numbers, which has been significant. In section 2.4, you can see the excellent work of, from a facility support perspective, we have now got 100% of our settings now receiving the loving lunches. So that's every single setting in North Lanarkshire has that, and you can see that within the video as well. As far as the admissions is concerned in 2.6 of the report, I would just highlight the fact that those parents and carers who asked and looking for placements, 93% got the first choice. And just as you can see in the report, in comparison to 86%, which again is a really good news story. In section 2.6.3, the deferred entry, you can see for this year, discretionary entries, the 94 received, 59 were approved, but I just want to highlight the fact of when there were 20 that appealed, and the reason for those appeals is sometimes there wasn't enough detail in the initial application. So therefore, when we get that detail, as you can see that 20 were approved, and again, there's been a significant improvement in comparison to the last 2 years. As you know, there's the new statutory deferred entry entitlement comes into effect from August 23. I think it's worth noting that we did ask to be part of the original pilot, but unfortunately from an early years Scottish Government perspective, we were not able to get a place on it because of the financial constraints. However, we've asked to be part of the second pilot, and hopefully we will be taken on. As you'll be aware, that the statutory entitlement for 1140 has started, and that started for us in North Lanarkshire on the 16th of August. And the final point I probably want to make is the financial section in 2.9. You will note the fact that there's been now a minor overspend of £177,000 being reported. Hopefully you'll recognise the fact of we have taken the risk significantly down. We were over sort of 2 million at one point, away back at the beginning of this journey of 1140, and you can see there's we're trying to bring this programme in and around the budget allocation that we had. Convener, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that report, Gerard, and for the video presentation. We have a few people in the chat bar. Cathy, I see that you're waving as well. I'll bring you in after Alan. We have Councillor Wilson first. Nathan?
Yep, thank you, convener. I just want to welcome the continuing progress that's been made in the planned new nursery at Wishaw Hill. I've raised the particular issue of setting a target completion date at previous committees and in meetings with Gerard and Jennifer, and I'm pleased the timescale for converting the Wishaw Hill community centre into a new nursery as included within today's report. This provides much greater clarity going forward on when the new early years facility might be ready for local families. At the last committee in May, I also asked if the proposals for the Cumbernauld Family Learning Centre could be included as part of the table showing the list of 1140 projects in North Lanarkshire. And I want to thank Gerard and Jennifer for adding the plans to the table on page 6 of the paper. Convener, if I may, I would also like to ask 2 questions on the sections of the report which concern Wishaw Hill. Firstly, 2.1.5 references the work now underway to finalise a name for the new centre. Up to this point, the proposed nursery has been referred to the Heathery Park Family Learning Centre, even after the initial plans to build the pitches at this location were dropped. I'm just looking for some detail on what the actual consultation with the local community has involved so far, and if a list of names, including the Heathery Park Family Learning Centre, has been formulated and circulated for consideration. Secondly, I was delighted to see the formal planning application being submitted in July. Based on the information available in the planning section of the Council's website, I note that no objections have been submitted, and I hope this can ensure speedy approval for the proposals. I also note that the website shows the status of the planning application as pending. I just want to ask if Gerard can offer any update on when a formal decision is likely to be made on the award of planning permission. That's all, Convener. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Nathan. Gerard, a few questions here for you.
Yeah, with regards to the naming of the actual centre, that does, as you've quite rightly said, goes out to local consultation. We obviously just want to make sure that in relation to your second one, we'll get that planning consent first, and then we will start doing that engagement. So with regards to timescales, I'll come with the specifics around that, and I'll ask colleagues in the early years team to consult with the planning department just to see if we've got any sort of timescales, but we hope it will be imminent with regards to that, and then we can start the process about the naming of the actual centre.
Thank you. You happy with that, Nathan?
Yeah, I'm happy with that, Frank.
Thank you. Takes us on to Councillor Stubbs. Alan?
Thanks, Frank. I've got 2 different strands of questions. I don't know if you want me to give them both all the questions at once, or do you want me to do one strand and then come back to me for the second strand?
No, happy for you to ask your questions in the one go, Alan, if you don't mind.
No worries. The first one is just in the general expansion of early years and the investment that's going on. It's obviously very welcome, but I know, or certainly what I don't know from the report is any mention of any sort of expansion in Gaelic medium early learning. We currently have 2 offerings for nurseries, one in Cumbernauld, one in Airdrie, with limited numbers, and particularly the one in Cumbernauld is it's not a term time, it's not a 9 till 3 nursery, it's a morning all year round, with the exception of the obvious holidays. That obviously limits the access to Gaelic early years for parents of children that aren't from Airdrie and Cumbernauld. There's no statutory entitlement to transport to nursery. So anybody out with Airdrie and Cumbernauld, or even within, you're talking really Cumbernauld and central Airdrie, doesn't really have access to that, and is that putting people off the offering when it comes to primary one that we currently have at Cumbernauld? So I'd be interested to hear what plans, if any, we have about expanding Gaelic medium nursery, whether that be through transport or by opening up other settings across the authority. A second strand, Frank, is on the deferred entry. I have a few questions. The first thing I would say is that I think that something as important as deferred entry probably merited its own report rather than being part of an overall report. But it is what it is. In 2.63, the tables that we have there, although it's clearly welcome that the number of applications, number of children being approved for discretionary deferral is going up year on year. It's worth noting as well that the number of children not approved is also going up year on year. In fact, it's more or less doubled over the last 3 years, from 2019-20 to 21-22. What that shows is that more parents are becoming aware of that as an option and are asking for it. It's certainly becoming much more of an issue, and we're approving more. It's very disappointing to see the number of people not being approved, the number of children not being approved to go to state nursery for that extra year when they're still 4 years old, also going up. On 2.6.6, the deferred entry working group, I'd like to know who is on that group, what meetings have been held so far, what the kind of substance of those meetings has been. I know that there's a few bullet points there of things that they're wanting to action. it mentions the ELC team, council and partner settings. Has any consideration been given to elected members been on that? Has any consideration been given to contacting the Give Them Time campaign, who have done so much work on this issue, to see if their valuable input would be something that could be brought into this discussion? How many meetings do we expect to have? And as I say, if we could have any sort of even after the meeting, Frank, if we could have copies of any sort of minute that's been taken at meetings so far, that would be really useful. I'll stop there. I'll see what the answer, and if you will let me come back in, if just based on the answer, Frank, I don't necessarily need to.
Okay, thanks, Alan. I'll bring Derek in specifically on your first point in relation to Gaelic, and then Gerard will pick up the points you've raised in relation to deferred entry. So in terms of the first point, Derek, do you want to pick up on the points raised by Councillor Stubbs?
Good afternoon, everyone. And yes, in response to Councillor Stubbs, I just think it is probably best to say that we intend to bring an update on the Gaelic language plan through a future committee, and at that point we'll be able to clarify our intentions as regards early years Gaelic. But obviously, as Councillor Stubbs knows, we've been trying to expand that provision in Talbray and obviously in our existing Cumbernauld site as well. And as Gerard has continually said throughout the whole process of bringing forward the 1140 offering, we continue to look at the mapping, and obviously if we can drive up the interest in Gaelic, which is part of the Gaelic language plan, we'll seek to expand the provision through early years. So hopefully that gives a response on the Gaelic side to Councillor Stubbs. Through you, Chair.
Thank you. Gerard, do you want to pick up on the points relating to deferred entry?
Yeah, I can see what Councillor Stubbs is saying there about not approved, but I probably want to say again about, yes, there's been a high number, far higher number of people who have applied for discretionary. You can see those people who weren't approved, but it quite clearly says if somebody comes in with additional information, bear in mind we can only go on the information that is supplied in the first instance. If we say no to that, they come back, and if they've got further evidence to show that that child should be deferred for a whole variety of different reasons, then look, we absolutely upheld and approved those appeals. I can't disagree with the fact of the point you've made about the differences year on year, but there has been an awful lot of improvement in there, and we do recognise the worries and concerns from parents there. With regards to the next section 2.6.6, about a working group, it's 2 officers from the early years team that are part of those initial groups and discussions. It is guided obviously from Scottish Government as well with regards to setting up this and about having our plans prepared. As far as the sequence of the meetings, I can get those sort of details to you. But as I mentioned, we did ask to be part of the pilot, and because of financial constraints, we weren't able to be part of the pilot because we're too big a local authority. However, further communication has just come in, and we've reapplied for, if you like, maybe phase 2 of this piece of work, because certainly we know that we have a lot to do. And probably if I can circle back to Derek's first point there, there's a huge, because of the deferred entries and because of the increased capacity that will cause us in August 2023, we need to go back and do a whole mapping exercise again to make sure that we have the capacity for those parents and carers, and also within the Gaelic medium as well. So that is something, as Derek has mentioned, that we'll be carrying out in due course.
Frank,
Alan, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the answer, but I don't think it answered any, or didn't answer a lot of the questions that I asked, specifically on 2.66. I'm assuming that this deferred entry working group is a council, is a North Lanarkshire Council working group, and it's only got 2 people on it from early years. Is that what the answer is?
No, sorry, I thought you meant from the early learning and childcare. There's a number of officers that are in that particular group, along with partner settings as well. Exact details I don't have in front of me, but I can get those to you. That'll give you the overview of that, and also the guidance that we're given from Scottish Government around that working group. But specifically from early years team, it's 2 officers.
So I think the point there is obviously there's guidance come from government, which is supported, I suppose, this group. Obviously we need some clarity on who's, you know, the totality of those who are engaged in that process, and I'm sure Gerard will be able to furnish yourself, Alan, and other members of the committee with that information, if he doesn't have it in front of him at this time. Does that satisfy you for this point, Alan, or do you want back in?
No. It's. I mean, I'm not one to prolong this into a question and answer thing here, but I had asked if there'd be any engagement with the Give Them Time campaign, who are working nationally on this and working with government. Has there been any discussion with them? Has there been any thought to giving them a place on this working group? And what about elected members of the council?
Directly about Give Them Time, the answer's no. There hasn't been. We're following the advice and guidance from Scottish Government about what we have to do in preparation for this new additional, I suppose, from 2023 legislation coming in about the statutory entitlement. So with regards to the makeup, I'll go back to the guidance, and what I'll do is I'll send you a direct response to that to give you exactly what we were asked to do in setting up this group. I'm happy to share that information with you.
Thank you.
Okay, content with that, Alan. Thank you. Councillor Burgess.
Thank you, convener. Gerard, I had an invite to visit Netherton, and it's an absolutely fabulous building. Just a couple of wee points on safety. There's an emergency side door where the kids and the people would come out. They run out onto the pavement, and no barrier stopping them running onto the road. You then have a barrier exactly on the front of the building, but it's very, in my opinion, inadequate for the busy road that it is. It's one of the lightweight barriers, and I think it should have some kind of crash ability to hold up against a car hitting it. That's the only 2 points I've got on it, and I don't know if you know about it, or I did discuss it with somebody. I thought it maybe would land on your desk.
Okay, listen, I'm sure Gerard can look into that, perhaps in consultation with James, who's on the call as well, who's heard the points from a corporate property point of view, Bob. And if there are any concerns, then they can absolutely be investigated further. I'm sure that the officers would commit to that, because the safety of young people is absolutely paramount. So thanks, Bob.
Frank. Thank you.
Claire, Councillor Barclay.
Thanks, Frank. Again, a really good report, and again, want to commend the work that's been done on the Cumbernauld Village site. Like myself, and I think it's not just ward councillors. I think we're all really looking forward to seeing the finished product on this, because it will be something special. And again, just to thank you on that. It's just to ensure on that one, Gerard, that there's communication between the developers that are on site and talking to housing, because of the potential for the new housing on the old school site, which is right next door. And it's something that I will take out with this committee, but it's that at the moment there's a bit of an argument going on about the boundary wall of who has responsibility for the wall that's bounding on the early learning centre, and it's the same wall, but it's the extension of it is going to be around where the new housing, and it's to retain that, but it's who's actually got the responsibility for making sure that it's safe and there's maintenance of it. There's a bit of neither side want to take responsibility for it, but I have a concern about that boundary wall and its safety, especially because of where it is and to do with the school. So that's my only thing. But say thank you very much for the report and for the contents in it. Once again, thank you.
Again, Gerard, something perhaps yourself and James can look into on behalf of Councillor Barclay there. And thanks for those comments, Claire. That's appreciated. Sorry, Cathy, I'll come back to you at this point. Councillor Johnson, I missed you earlier on.
Thanks very much, Convener. Just to say, this is a very good report. Obviously, a lot of work's been done in early years, and I'm heartened by quite a number of things in it. But first of all, since my colleague has brought up the Gaelic nursery, there is an issue arising there because it's a term time and it's not on all day. Some young parents are finding it difficult because they're working. They have no way to get to the Gaelic nursery, so they have to put their children into an English nursery, and they are under the impression that they are not allowed to go to Gaelic to follow on in primary one, which is not true, but I think something has to be done about that. Either change of hours. When promoting the Gaelic nursery, it has to, or the Gaelic school, it has to be loud and clear that children do not have to have attended a Gaelic nursery prior to going into primary one.
Okay.
Can I go to
sorry.
I've got a few things. Not
carry on, Cathy, no problem.
Okay. Page 7, I'm delighted to see outdoor settings progressing. It's very encouraging to see one of the nurseries now been registered with an outdoor setting, along with one of the partner nurseries. The next thing, could I ask the question on table? I can find it. Page 8, table 3. Equity and excellence leads. Is that a newly formed post for the 1140 hours? As I see, there's nothing under the 600 hours. So is that a new post that's been created in the nursery? The other thing I would like to talk about is the document that's coming at the I've mixed it up now. Realising the ambition, sorry, being me. Is that document published and in nurseries, or is it still to come? I think it's an excellent idea. I felt for a long time nurseries have had too many documents to dip into, and this seems to be, if I'm correct in my reading, that it is an amalgamation of 2 or 3 documents. So that would be a welcome. The other thing, one more thing, page 11, talking about the meals, Gerard, could we have a copy of the menu? Appendix 11's not in the papers. And that's me for this one.
Okay, thanks very much for those comments, Cathy. I'll bring Gerard in on the majority of your points, but just Janie O'Neill may wish to touch on your reference to Gaelic, I suppose similar to what was raised by Councillor Stubbs. Janie's obviously been leading on this on behalf of the authority. So Janie, anything you would like to say in regards to Councillor Johnson's points?
Thanks, Convener, and good afternoon, everybody, and thanks, Councillor Johnson. So we're reviewing the comms to ensure that there's no confusion around pathways. Councillor Johnson is part of our wider review of Gaelic and is part of our Gaelic language plan. So again, we're intending to bring a paper forward in the next committee, which will detail this, but in the meantime and in the shorter term, I'll ensure that that's looked into as a way to support parents who wish for their child to progress into P1. So absolutely, we'll take that on board, and thank you very much for raising that point.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Janie. Gerard, on the points raised specifically with regards to early years, obviously in terms of the equity and excellence leads and a few of the other points, there's been an extensive staffing exercise taking place. Do you want to just touch on that and Councillor Johnston's other point?
Yep. So with regards to in table 3, just you said it is a new post. Remember when we a way back we set up a new pathway for our young people entering in, and a pathway for them working through to become up to the head of centre and then beyond on to the quality officer. So there's a stepping stone pathway, and I'll maybe send it to you when I'm sending the other document you've asked about, just so you can see exactly those specific posts. But it is something as almost like a stepping stone through the structure that we've now created, and that was something we worked with the trade unions on and absolutely welcomed that sort of pathway, because there was no structure within the early years or pathway for people within early years. With regards to realising the ambition, yes, it is a new document. It is out and is part of the quality training. That is part of what is the quality officers are doing. As you can see in table 3 as well, we have the quality officers who have got a variety of different sort of roles and responsibilities, and they lead in different areas within early years. And one of them is, especially when there's these new documents, about actually putting them into practice. And apologies about the meals, but what I'll do is I'll send you both those documents, the pathways and the 1140, the 11 lunches menu. I'll get them across to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks for those questions, Cathy. Councillor Goldie is next. Willie?
Thanks, Convener. Just first of all, to pass on very positive comments and users of the Broomlands early year site. It's been really good, the feedback from the people that are using that. Just a question, page 15, table 12, and it's on NLC children applying to other authorities. Is this because of perhaps employment of the parents or that? Do we research to see why they're going elsewhere? Is it because it's handier for parents workers? That's really the question. And just a wee comment as well, I know it may be on the electronic copy, but we've got highlighted in red, which I'm assuming is the lighter grey down the bottom. Highlighted in red doesn't help much, that black and white copy. Cheers.
In response to that, the reason why, yes, just exactly, it's to do with childcare arrangements and where people are working. And apologies about the colour for Falkirk and Stirling Council. So we'll make sure we're doing this again. We'll have it updated properly.
Thanks for that. I don't see any other questions or comments in the chat bar at the minute. Are we happy to agree with the recommendations as outlined? Thank you very much.
Yep, agreed.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Takes us on to agenda item number 3, which is our GIRFEC quality framework for health and wellbeing. It's in pages 33 to 44 in your packs. Gerard, would you like to touch on the salient points within this report?
Thanks, Convener, and I'll try and keep this one short. So this is really just an update for committee on the progress of the implementation and development of the GIRFEC refresh process. The paper also considers a further development of the health and wellbeing quality framework. We're obviously seeking to get your approval to engage with the Children's Service Partnership to develop this common framework. I probably just want to highlight the 2 appendices. I think they summarise everything. The first appendix 1 is the health and wellbeing quality framework. And in section 2.2.1 of the report, it says, why are we doing it? And you can see that in there. It's about the governance and the policy drivers. And how are we doing it? Again, you'll be able to see that as about the key systems and processes. And what are we going to do? That's really about our outputs and outcomes. To display it in that way is to bring clarity, first of all, of understanding and simplicity of messaging to align the services and to aid understanding. What it says in the report is it is a very busy landscape for health and wellbeing. There's so much that is going on there, and I think this sets the context. Appendix 2, in short, shows the core elements of the integrated wellbeing work that's been carried out today. So asking you to note the report, but most importantly, to approve the further development and engagement with Children's Service Partnership to develop this common framework, in short, a common language that can be used and understood by everybody. Happy to take any questions, Convener.
Thanks, Gerard. Councillor Johnson, Cathy. Cathy, I think you're muted. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Okay, right. I think this is a great report, Gerard. I think it's sorely needed in schools. I think the health and well-being factor in the curriculum is the most difficult. It's so diverse and complex and just extremely difficult to nail down. And I think this will make a huge difference for teachers' point of view and beneficial from the children's angle as well. I know there's huge amounts of work have gone into this, and there's more work to be done on it. I realise that, but I think it's a huge step forward. I would just like to ask one question. 2.5. I think you could make a study of this document on its own, to be perfectly honest with you. 2.5.3. The quantitative data and the qualitative data. Now, I can't see where children with emotional needs sit in here. I can see that the quantitative data is all dependent on hard evidence, and the second one is heading the same way. It's looking at that, and I've just wondered where the child is that has emotional and social difficulties that aren't labelled in any way or have no diagnosis. Is observations of children's behaviours, do they come into this anywhere? I can't see where that's evidenced. And there are a lot of children who may miss out on assistance if everything's got to be through diagnosis. I think that's all I have to say. I think it's very good. Oh no, the other thing I wanted to ask was the licenses for the outcome star, which I don't fully understand, but I can understand where it's going to. How did you come about to choose the staff? Are you rolling it? Is it a rolling out programme? Is it primary? Is it secondary? Is it ASN? Or is it cross sector? Because I see 730 staff are using it, and because it's a lot of money for licenses, 34,000 plus. I just would like a comment on that. Okay.
Okay, thanks very much, Cathy. A couple of points here, Gerard. Are you happy to pick them up?
Yeah, probably my next paper probably gives the answer to your first question round about that sort of point from a children's voice perspective. The SDQ, certainly from a primary perspective, was carried out by the teachers and specifically around the children. But you'll obviously be aware of GRFEC, and obviously that is where teachers are doing those analyses on a day-to-day basis, especially within a primary school. When you have got a teacher who's in front of a child, a young person, a class, they know that child inside out, and that's why, from a strengths and difficulties questionnaire perspective, that's where they should have the most information, or their colleague has from the previous year, about a specific child. So whether it be within the quantitative or qualitative data that we have, there is that specific observations that are made so that decisions can be made and comments can be made, whether that be through the sort of GURFEC process, if a child actually requires that. So to answer your question in short, yes, there would be those sort of observations there. And as far as the licenses are concerned, the reason this was selected was because of our colleagues in social justice. They've been using this, and we're looking to have, it's a bit like what I've just said about this integrated approach, the quality framework. It's a universal assessment tool that will be used. Yes, it's maybe a lot of money, but we obviously have that first year of people who are the trainers to train the staff into using this, and it will yet be another tool that will be used in the assessment for children moving forward. So I recognise the costs that are there, but I suppose there is a significant amount of staff that we need to train moving forward.
Thanks, Gerard. Sorry, Councillor Johnson, are you wanting a supplementary?
But what I really wanted to know was which sector did you choose first of all to train?
It will be our, for us anyway, there's a number, so our colleagues in community learning and development want to be part of this as well, so it will be across the board, so it will be for all staff, so that will be across the service.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Cathy. Councillor Castles. Tom?
Thanks, Chair. Gerard, it's back onto the outcome star. What kind of feedback are you getting? I see it was using the Justice Service, might have been using a different way there compared to education, or there will be similarities. What kind of feedback are you getting from the people who are using it as to the quality of that as a tool for improving health and well-being?
Gerard?
I'll probably bring Alison in the back of this, but certainly it was one of Alison's team who came to our SLT and gave a presentation of how this is used within the Justice team. And that's why we've taken this on, and because of the feedback that we received there. They are the ones who, I suppose, are the main trainers for this moving forward. And I suppose it's again going back to what I said, that we've got this universal assessment that is actually going to be used. And it's instead of all these different types of assessment tools, we've got one tool that's getting used across services. And I'm also talking about housing, I'm talking about CLD, education and families and so on and so forth. So it would be universal. I don't know if Alison, convener through you, maybe wants to come in as well.
Alison?
Yes, convener, and probably just to add to what Gerard says, just for some reassurance, the tool is a universal tool, but the actual format can be adapted to different situations. So the dimensions on the star that are used to support conversations with service users, or in Justice case, or children and young people, are slightly different. So there's a Justice star and there's a family star. So it's the same principles, but it's actually different dimensions that are discussed with children than with Justice service users. But essentially, in terms of benefits, there are two main ones. It allows a conversation with the person about what and it's obviously carried on at different levels depending on whether it's a child or adult, about their needs and how they see their world. And it also allows you to track progress against the different dimensions. So it measures, how well things are with this particular aspect of well-being, and it allows you to go back to that at a point in time and look at what the impact of the work that you've been doing with a child or adult is. The other thing that you can do at service-wide position is you can collate all of that information and look at the impact of interventions across the service. So you can look either at an individual level at progress, or you can look at what the stars are telling us about needs across a cohort of people and also the progressive interventions. But it's a different star, but with the same principles that's used for children than is used for justice.
Tom, are you happy with that?
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks very much. I don't see any further questions on this paper. Are we happy to agree the recommendations? Okay, thank you very much for that, colleagues. That takes us on to agenda item number 4, which is the Health and Wellbeing Survey, the Strengths and Difficulties Questionnaire. Gerard will take us through this report. Colleagues, I'm sure when you read it, you'll see the amount of work that has taken place to get us to this place. I mean, this is the most comprehensive questionnaire of its type in Scotland, and it's something that everyone who is engaged in that should be very proud of the work that has been put into this this piece of work. So, Gerard, if you could take us through the main points in the report, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. I suppose this is specifically in relation to the question that Councillor Johnson asked as well. So the background to this is that between January and June of this year, we carried out a population-wide survey of the health and wellbeing of the pupils in North Lanarkshire. So in total, as you can see within the report, over 41,000 children in North Lanarkshire engaged with the survey. The SDQ was designed to be completed by young people from age 11 and above, and below it must be completed by adults. In this case, it was the teachers. In our ASM provisions, all children with a cognitive age of 11 and over completed the questionnaire. The remainder were undertaken by the teachers. It's maybe just worth noting the actual background and the structure of the survey. 25 questions. They're in 5 main categories: emotion, conduct, hyperactivity, peer relationships, and pro-social. It's then broken into 3 subsets: the externalizing for conduct and hyperactivity. Then we have the internalizing, which is the emotion and the peer relationships, and the pro-social. In the report, you can see the fact that we had a 98% return. So that is a phenomenal data set that we've got from the primary. For the secondary, we had a 70% return, and probably just want to remind you the specific focus for children and young people, especially within our secondary schools at that time towards the end of the school session last year was the exams. So that's why we didn't have a higher return. And then the ASN provisions was 56%, giving us this overall 85%. So as far as our primaries are concerned, I have to state this is one moment in time. This is a questionnaire filled in by a professional or a child or young person at one moment in time. However, from a primary perspective, what it is showing us that the vast majority of our children have and are, as far as this piece of evidence has shown us at the moment, are resilient. However, what it has shown us is that for a percentage of our boys within the primary schools, there is further work and analysis that we have to do. With regards to our secondary schools, again, it was our females within the secondary sector that commented with some social difficulties that we obviously need to drill down and get some more information. We can obviously compare that, as you can see within the report, to the Realigning Children's Services data that was taken in 2017. It shows similar picture as well. And I suppose the next steps for us is a further analysis of the data, including the triangulation with existing data that we have, consultations to better understand and share the data, and we've been doing that at the moment. And also the next steps for children as far as the universal, additional and intensive level of support that's required. What this will allow us to do is, most specifically, is target resources at those children and young people that specifically need that help, instead of just giving the same thing to all children, taking our resources and targeting it. And by that I mean we have a significant resource as far as the money that was given to us by Scottish Government in relation to school-based counselling, and we need to make sure that those children who are in need of it, as an example, do get it. And as I say, that realignment of resources, not just about school-based counselling, but other services and offers is there. Convener, that's the sort of broad overview of this. I intend, hopefully, we will have done a further analysis by the time of the next committee, where I can give more specific detail around the surveys and what we've actually done as a result.
Thanks very much, Gerard. I see Councillor Johnson's in the chat bar. Councillor Johnson, Cathy.
Yeah, thanks very much. It's absolutely, this is a fabulous document, but again, it could do with just a meeting on its own. There's so much in it. I'm only going to ask one question, Gerard, you'll be pleased to know. 2.33. Now, you might not be able to answer that because there's so much information. Right? Was this result consistent across all the schools, or was it just prevalent in some and not other schools? The boy thing.
So with that specific question, bear in mind the schools are hold the specific details of the responses by those males and their names. From us, from a central perspective, we do not have the specific names. However, when this is the sort of thing that Derek has been asking for, he wants to drill down more and to find out, is this a specific issue in one particular school or schools or in clusters? That is what we would probably need to do next, is that further analysis of that. But to be reassured, and also from the head teacher's perspective in relation to the realigning children's services where it was anonymous and we did not have the details of the child, the young person, this time around we do, or the schools have that. And if there is a child, a young person who is showing those, I suppose, levels of need, that support can be given directly to them. So hopefully that's answered your specific question, Councillor Johnson.
Yes,
Cathy, you
thanks.
content with that?
Thanks very much, yes, because, well, the next thinking in that is, I'm glad Derek's thinking along the same lines as me. Is what do we do then? You know, do we start looking at these boys, the curriculum that we're presenting to them? But that's for another day. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks very much, Cathy. I see Councillor Kelly's got his hand up, and then we'll come to Councillor Goldie. Paul?
Thanks, Convener. I mean, first of all, I think it's a phenomenal response and huge credit to all the young people who took part, all the staff that made it happen, and you've put in the paper. It's very, very unique in Scotland terms. Should be very proud of the numbers of people who have responded. First question is just around 2.25, and you explained around ASN and some of the difficulties in filling out this kind of type of questionnaire, but just to get reassurance of how we make sure that we've got 56% we engage with all our ASN young people and their families, and maybe if it's not through this questionnaire, what other methods we can use, because it's really important to get their voice. And I echo what you say as well, Gerard. I think you said it well in terms of our young people are very resilient, and we should be very proud of what they have done throughout this pandemic. One of the unique things that's happened in recent history, and our young people in North Lanarkshire certainly have led the way in fantastic response and continuing education. My other question is just on page 111. Again, great to see the percentages completed, but just from my point of view, one of my local schools, Our Lady's High School, Motherwell, I noticed that their percentage was 40%, quite significantly lower than other schools. And it's just to get some information about, again, how do we work with the school to try and make sure all the young people's voices have been heard, and is there anything specific that was in this school that made it more difficult to get the questionnaires done? Thanks.
Okay, a couple of points here, Gerard.
So just to give you that reassurance, one of the things that Derek has asked the group, the small working group that we have on this, is about that we'll maybe need to go back to the schools and ask for further information. So if you take the ASN specifically, bear in mind there was a lot of children that were off school, especially in the ASN sectors, especially just from that sort of January to June sort of time. There were some other difficulties there as well, from the fact that some of the schools tried a whole variety of different approaches. And that probably take me to my next point about the fact of some schools set up an app and they sent it out and did it electronically. Specifically around Our Ladies, there were discussion with Our Ladies because they could see the fact that they, like other schools, their numbers were very low. But again, is what I would say is that the fact is that we'll go back to the schools if we feel as if there is an opportunity and a need for further information there.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Councillor Goldie. Willie?
Thanks, Convener. It's an absolutely tremendous amount of information we've gathered here. And I realise it is a snapshot. Is there an intention to repeat this later on and compare the results we got this time to previously? And looking at the amount of responses you've had, it would broaden out any anomalies that we have from perhaps the way the information was sourced by various teachers or that. If someone produced a document like this and was working in the labs or that, we'd be looking at potentially getting a scientific paper out of it and getting something published. Is there anything along the lines of education that you can do with that? Or is that, I know teachers and everyone else is under tremendous pressure just now because of the COVID thing. It's maybe not the ideal time for it, but it would be worthwhile carrying this forward, and particularly the changes between the young males and the older females and difficulties in that. It would be interesting to see whether there was a crossover point in there, but it just tremendous piece of work, it really was, and it would be interesting to see how things develop.
Thanks very much, Willie. Gerard, do you want to touch on some of those points?
Yeah, I think as Councillor Kelly had mentioned before, there has been, especially within our primary sector, a phenomenal amount of work and effort put in by our primary colleagues to ensure that that was done for the children and young people. With regards to, would we do this again? Yes, I think there would be the intention, because now that we've got this, we wouldn't want to lose this data set and to make the comparisons, because in future what we'll be saying then is, okay, so we had this information and then the so what question comes in. What did you do about it? How did you realign your resources? And most importantly, did it make any difference? So therefore, that's where we need to go back out and to do it. And as Councillor Kelly mentioned before, this is where we will be pushing again with specific schools to say, well, you've done it once, but what are the lessons we can learn from other schools about how they managed to get significantly higher return rates than others? And again, within our ASN, probably because of the specific individual needs of those children, sometimes with very complex needs, it is very difficult to carry out those questionnaires. However, we could go back again and look for alternative ways of doing that, and probably maybe engaging with the families. But again, you would skew your data set, I think, and maybe your results there. But to answer your question, yes, we will be doing this again, because I think it's a really important data set that we've got, and we need that sort of comparison moving forward.
Thanks very much, Gerard. Councillor Hogg. Paddy?
Thanks, Convener. I would endorse Councillor Goldie's comment that, one, it's extremely valuable research work to be done, and Gerard's comment that it would be probably a very good exercise to do again, in particular because it has been done during this last 18 months, when, as I think most people will know, there's been changes to the practicality in classrooms, i.e. people wearing masks. Anyone should know that, or everyone should know, that 90% of communication is body language. So if you've got people wearing masks, there's going to be possibly a drop in the effectiveness of the educational just impetus itself. And particularly when you go into ASN, when there's stuff prevalent in sort of news media that infectivity, kids could end up killing their granny, this sort of thing. I mean, I know one or two educational psychologists who were suggesting that one of the worst things that would happen during the pandemic period was trauma to the youngest kids and those that maybe didn't understand what was going on. Probably lots of people don't understand what's going on, but that's a moot question. So I think it would be a very valuable exercise to hear the voice of the pupils at different ages, and I think we should do this every year, and obviously seek to monitor what levels of trauma exist, and even ask the pupils what's their experience, masks and of the testing, etc. I think we should be blatantly straight and honest and see how we get through this, and I look forward to the end of this pandemic and our education coming back to being what it should be like.
Thanks very much for that comment, Councillor Hogg. I'll maybe bring Derek in just to pick up on a couple of the points you've raised there. Derek?
Thanks, Chair. So Gerard's given you quite comprehensive answers, I think, to most of the questions. The issue for me, Councillor Hogg, and one of the reasons why we wanted to do the survey was there is a fair amount of public narrative out there around about the trauma for young people around COVID. And as a partnership anyway, we're required to try and gather information around about the well-being of young people to allow us to make effective plans. And I note that there are colleagues on the call who are part of that Children's Services Partnership process. So there's two or three things. First of all, if people are traumatised, then there's no point in simply assuming that they just need to be more resilient. That clearly won't work. Equally, if people are resilient and are able to push forward with their learning, we need to do everything we can to encourage that. Still allows us to take a proportionate approach. What we have here is a data set held at school level that tells us about individual children and what they need that practitioners are engaged with. That will help planning at all levels. And it helps the line of sight between planning at partnership level and activity by practitioners at school cluster level by both educationalists and those who work in partnership with them to support children. So it should strengthen everything we do. And one of the things that Gerard was referring to before was the importance of doing a worked example based on this to wrap around any research we can to support our activity and to make sure that we answer the so what question that comes from having a report such as this. So we want to analyse it further, we want to align our activity to it. We want to make sure we take a proportionate approach to individual children for whom we have data, but also groups of children. And the last thing I'll say is the schools, through their family groups, are already engaging in the best way to handle these data sets and to learn lessons. So part of the worked example we will bring forward through future committees is really to kind of bottom out some of the issues members have raised today, including that last one about trauma and how that will then play out. If I can make one last point, it would simply be this. We are a wee bit concerned that there might be a level of underreporting by the boys in secondary, and we want to dig into that with young people at school level to work out if it's the case that we have got a degree of underreporting there. Because you know that it's actually helpful to us if young women tell us that there are concerns with mental health, because we can deal with that. It's more problematic if people maybe minimising a survey, maybe don't want to tell us things, and then that leads to other issues. So and members will understand that mental health issues among young men are sometimes more difficult to discern. And there's quite a lot of partnership data which supports that assertion, both very locally in North Lanarkshire, but also Scotland and UK wide as well. So those are my responses to what I heard there from Councillor Hogg, Chair.
Thanks very much, Derek. And I think that final comment is very pertinent and something that must be reflected upon as part of this report. So thanks very much for that. I don't see any further comments at this stage. Are we happy to agree with the recommendations as outlined? Thank you very much. That takes us on, colleagues, to agenda item number 5, which is the proposed relocation of Bothwell Park High School. This is a request to go out to consultation and it aligns with the ASN review that a number of members were involved in, and of course decisions that were taken at previous committees. I'll ask Gerard McLaughlin if he can touch on the main points within this report, and Anne Munro will also perhaps provide further clarity on this report if required. Gerard?
Thanks, Convener. I'm just now going to share a short presentation that probably gives a more sort of broad overview of the proposal we're asking for approval here today. I'm just going to be able to hopefully make that a bit bigger. It's a slideshow, and hopefully everyone can see that. So, as Convener said, this is a proposal to relocate Bothwell Park High School to the Edward Lawson Centre. Just to take you back, you'll remember in the 2019 Education and Families Committee, we approved a review for additional support needs of 12 recommendations, and 2 of them are highlighted there in relation to this specific proposal, which was or is about the partnership working will be strengthened in a revised support around the school model. And recommendation 11, there's a clear plan for the future of the ASN estate. And I suppose this is the second phase of that. For those of you who don't know, Bothwell Park is an ASN secondary school for children and young people in S1 to S6 with severe and complex needs. The school role has grown significantly. There originally it was for just under 30 pupils. It's now over 50 pupils. And certainly from our perspective, we recognise the evolving complex support needs of those particular children, young people, especially in relation to mobility and moving and handling. So our proposal, as you can see here, is the Edward Lawson Centre. For those of you who don't know, the Edward Lawson Centre sits in Motherwell area and the Coltness Road. It's a fantastic, huge building that sits there. And most importantly, as you can see from some of the pictures there, this is as is now. And this sort of picture at the top here shows the fact that the rooms themselves have doors that move outside. Why is that important? Well, at the moment, we have got a facility, Bothwell Park, that does not have anything like that sort of basic outdoor opportunity that is there for teachers and young people to just be able to open a door. They have to come out of a room, they have to walk along a corridor, they've even got to come down from a specific floor. So most importantly, as you can see, one entrance in, automatic doors, and automatic doors that take you through different areas. At the moment, we don't have that sort of facility in Bothwell Park. I was in there recently and had to hold the doors for a child and young person coming through. In this day and age, that is wrong. That's a barrier, and there shouldn't be those barriers for the children and young people. So this setting here, long, wide, open corridors, rooms that open out, as I say, to the outside. Why is that important? From an educational point of view, there are some children that see learning as a massive barrier, especially if it's indoors and they don't have that freedom. And we can develop outdoor learning using the facilities and the grounds that are absolutely there. This would take an investment from the council, but I believe it's the right thing to do for those particular children and young people. So as you can see here, what I'm actually saying is that the children learn in a more attractive setting, which would broaden their curricular experiences, meets the challenges presented by the council's close to home policy to repatriate pupils from out of authority provision. At the moment, we are not able to bring children back, and sometimes because of the facilities that they're in, we are not able to compete with and to give those, I suppose, children, young people, the same offering as they're receiving in other councils. There'll also be structured links can be made with St Aidan's Primary School. They currently have, which is directly across the road, they currently have a language and communication centre for primary 1 to 4. It'll also provide continuity and progression for the children primary 5 to 7 who need that specialist support in LCSE, and also provide assessment unit for children in ages 3 to 5 So therefore we would give a 0 to 18 facility. So what do I mean by that? So 0 to 18, what I mean is in those early years there would be an assessment centre. In the primary it would be maybe 1 or 2 rooms that would give those children from across the road in St Aidan's who, for example, they reach primary 4 and they cannot transition to our mainstream. They need something else. They need that support before they maybe move into that sort of senior phase within a primary school. And again, it provides an excellent pathway for our children and giving them that 0 to 18 option. What will happen as a result of locating, we believe that we'll have improved access to high quality indoor facilities which meet a wider range of complex needs and facilities. At the moment, some of the children in there, because there's so many, the space is being reduced and we need a bigger footprint for those children and young people. So therefore we can have this area within Edward Lawson redesigned to meet those needs. And most importantly, as I mentioned about this outdoor space, yes, there is great outdoor space that is being created, but it's not the type of outdoor space where you have from each room where a child and young person is, that opportunity to open a door and to allow children to go out. Obviously, there will be increased capacity for assessment and planning from the early stages. That is something that is needed within that particular area. And again, we would ensure there's that strengthened integrated planning with partners moving forward. But most importantly, this setting will allow those children, young people to have the care and attention that they require. I'm afraid to say the facilities that are currently in Bothwell Park do not meet the intimate care needs that some of our children need. They need the space. Yes, we can go in and do adaptations, but good enough? No, I would say it's not. So again, just finally, I would just say about the indicative timeline. Obviously, our report has been taken to CMT and been approved to take forward. There has been communication with affected staff and trade unions. We're bringing it here to education and families, asking for your approval to go out to consultation. Convener, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Gerard, for a very comprehensive report there. I see that Councillor Burgess is the first member in the chat bar. Bob, over to you.
Thanks, Convener. Gerard, it's good to see this building getting looked at for this. But can you tell us the condition and possible costs on it at the moment?
Gerard.
So as far as a condition, it was used recently for training and development, and before that our social work colleagues used it. I have recently walked around the building. It's actually in very good condition. There's been a desktop exercise that has taken place at the moment. I have to say, a desktop exercise. The next stage is, if approved for consultation, we can give an update about the specific costs there, but there would need to be work that would need to be done, not both internally and externally, and that is with specialist equipment to allow the mobility for the children and young people. But to answer your specific question, as you can see from the pictures, I know it's outdoors, but it's actually in really good condition. However, there's still further analysis that needs to be done there, and that will only be done once we get to the point of, if a council agree, we go out to consultation, and then that next step, if approved, then we would then start to look at the specifics and the requirements that are for the children and young people.
Super, thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Councillor Barclay. Claire.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks very much, Gerard, for a really good report on that. I think as we saw even through the ASN review, just how important it is for our young people with ASN to have the correct facilities around about them, to be comfortable, to be educated in the right surroundings. And thank you for the presentation, for the pictures, because I think it's really, really important for those of us that don't know the area and don't know either the schools. And to be fair, I didn't know really very much at all about the Edward Lawson Centre itself until this had came up. And I think the pictures that you've provided and the presentation make it an awful lot clearer for us the advantages, in my opinion, of us actually seeing that this centre being set up and being across the road from St Aidan's. I think it is another advantage. I think being able to come out the doors in each of the classrooms and have that open space, and I'm presuming, because I don't really expect otherwise, but my question is obviously safety of the children, of having been able from each of the classrooms to come out into the open space to ensure that there is the safety, that a child couldn't go round the back of a teacher or a classroom assistant out into the open space, and it would make sure that all of the safety considerations of having that is a benefit and safety weighing up, and I know that you will have taken that into consideration. Just looking for that reassurance.
Gerard?
Certainly, Councillor Barclay, obviously the safety of our children within our schools and centres is a major priority for us as a service. So therefore, we would go to our colleagues to design the building and the outdoor facilities to ensure it met the needs of the children and young people. Obviously, within our ASN schools, there is always those children who will try and get themselves away from the school, and we obviously need to build that in. So we would absolutely give you that reassurance that the design of that would meet all of those children's needs in a safe and secure way, but using the environment to try and help those children most importantly. But yes, safety would be the priority moving forward for the design of this.
Thank you so much for that, Gerard, as expected that you would do. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. I don't see any further questions on this paper. Are we happy to agree the recommendations? Okay, thank you very much, colleagues. That takes us on to agenda item number 6, which is universal free school meals, the phased approach for primaries 4 and 5. A very welcome report. James McKinstry is here to touch on the main points within the report. And James, I'll pass over to you at this point.
Thank you, Convener. So this is a policy objective that we're actually implementing at the moment. So the main purpose in bringing the report is to just advise committee how we're progressing this piece of work. So you'll know that in August of this year, the free school meals were rolled out to primary 4 children. So that is now in place. And in January of next year, that will be rolled out further to primary 5 kids. And from August 22, that will be rolled out further. So just accounting for the changes in August of this year and those in January of next year, there'll be in the region of an additional 7,700 meals provided to school children on a daily basis. A few things in the report I'll just touch on. You'll see in paragraph 1.3 that when we've been implementing this initiative, and this initiative has been getting implemented over a period of time in the past, that we do work with a range of services across the council to make sure that it gets implemented in a planned and ultimately successful way. Section 2.1 of the report details a number of the practical issues that we have to manage going forward, and we have managed these successfully for August of this year. The policy is implemented, and we are on track to get it implemented further for January of next year. And you'll see in section 2.2 that we've also expanded the breakfast services as well. That's in line with previous policy decisions of this council. So just in summary, what the report just advises that we have implemented it successfully for August of this year, and we are continuing to plan for how we would roll it out further as we go forward.
Thanks very much, James. Councillor Linden, Jordan.
Thanks so much, Convener. Obviously welcome the paper and welcome the substantial financial commitment outlined at section 6.1.1 in terms of just under £2 million of financial support to deliver the project from Scottish Government. James, just in terms of section 6.1.3, in terms of future capital requirements, I note that it says facility support services are considering and working on what the requirements may be in 21-22. Do you have an indication of when it's likely they'll receive an update on what those potential capital requirements will be, and when will members be updated accordingly?
I don't have an update on that at the present time. What we've done is we've implemented it, fully to this point, and we're continuing to do that as going forward. As I mentioned in referring to paragraph 1.3, we do work with other services of the council going forward, and you'll see in paragraph 2.1.1, for example, some of the kind of practical issues we try to do in kind of managing the state that we've got. And you'll see in 2.1.7 that we are currently reviewing the capital equipment requirements as we go forward at the present time. So we are continuing to work on that. And I suppose in answer to your direct question, I don't have that work is not concluded at this time. But and I wouldn't be anticipating coming back to committee necessarily simply, just on that piece of work. We might, we can come back to committee once the rollout in January 2022 is in place, give an update on that, and perhaps provide a wee bit information on the forward planning going forward.
Thanks very much for that, James. Councillor Castles, Tom.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. Just a little bit more information on 2.1.2. I appreciate there would have to be difficulties as you're increasing the number of meals. Is this in a large number of schools? Is it a major issue? Is it easily being dealt with? Is it causing a lot of difficulties with the schools now and of course in the future? Is there other extensions? And what do you see as a long-term solution to these difficulties?
At the present time, it's not causing us a major issues in terms, the group that we work with in 1.3, that also includes head teachers, and it includes head teachers of different sizes of schools. So we can get a small school, a medium school, and a large school. So we can start to see how that can impact that. And we have been able to implement the initiative so far using the space that's available in schools. So the schools have worked with us very significantly to achieve that. But certainly, as we move towards August 2022, for example, that might become more of a challenge going forward. But again, that's probably linked into the response I gave to Councillor Linden. We come back later, future committee, and maybe give a wee bit more details of the forward planning of that area. We're not simply planning for any capital projects to be taken forward, but we want to assess it before we go with that.
Thanks, James. Councillor Hogg.
Thanks, Convener. I want to say thanks to James for the work that's been put into this paper, and it's an interesting contrast to observe on page 136 at 2.22 that the uptake of the Breakfast Club, which we thought was going to be very effective, ended up being quite low. And the indication there was what, 8.10%, etc., that sort of thing. But the initiative overall is very welcome, because if we have, especially those from the more deprived backgrounds, getting healthier food, it should, in the long term, have a contribution towards the bridging the attainment gap. And it's good to see that there's new nutritional requirements. The legislation being brought in 2020 now being implemented, particularly the dietary goals to reduce the amount of sugar. I tried to explain this before at a different meeting, that sugar tends to take out B6, which is a precursor to GABA. GABA is a relaxing thing that allows people to focus and deal with problems and just relax, problem solving a lot easier. So if someone's consuming far too much sugar, they'll tend to be more agitated, particularly if it's cans of different types of juice. And I think there's a contributory factor towards most of the pupils with the ASN of just literally the wrong type of diet. So if we improve the proper diet of many of our more deprived kids from different backgrounds, we should, in the long term, improve the quality of the education because they're more able to learn, and particularly things like omega-3, etc., for healthy brain cell growth. So it's a welcome report, and I think it's more moving in the right direction. But it's good to see that the awareness of the marketing initiative and the need to communicate this effectively so that people have the right expectations. And I hope we deliver it very effectively, which I think we will. Thank you.
Thank you, Paddy. Councillor Mooney.
Thanks very much, Frank. Just leading on from Councillor Hogg's comments there, it's the same section that I've got a question regarding. You know, it says that there's a low attendance for the Breakfast Club. Have we done any form of analysis as to why that is low? Have we questioned parents why they're not attending? Have we spoke at parent council meetings to find out why, etc.? It's just, I see that on the following page in section 3, we've said that we're going to make use of more marketing initiatives to try and drive that up. But I'm just curious if the council has any information as to why it's been low. Is it simply a communication problem? Thank you.
I don't know if Gerard or Derek maybe wants to pick up on that point around the breakfast clubs. I'm conscious that James is not probably best placed to answer on that one. James, it's up to yourself if you want to pick that up.
Yeah, I think so. And then perhaps if my colleagues want to come in and add anything. But breakfast clubs have been running for quite a long time in North Lanarkshire, and there's never been a high uptake in breakfast clubs. And we do promote them in terms of, and the schools promote them as well. I think the work that the schools do is excellent as to how they promote them. I think there's many reasons why the breakfast clubs are not as popular, say, as free lunches. I think a big part of the reasoning is the fact that quite often families want to spend breakfast together. They might have more than one child, for example, and they want to spend that time in the morning with their kid. That's part of the experience as well. So, and I think where families are sending their kids along to the breakfast clubs, that's working really well with their personal circumstances as well. So I'm not convinced we'll ever get, a very high uptake in breakfast clubs. I think lunchtime is always the area where we'll get more of an uptake going forward.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Mooney, did you want a supplementary?
Thanks very much, Convener. No, I mean, you did partially answer my question there. It's just, I appreciate you have went out and spoken to schools, etc. But just speaking from my own perspective as a mum of 4, 3 of which are still at school, certainly sitting down having breakfast together is not something that happens in this house. We certainly have dinner together, but usually in the morning, what happens is I scream and shout at the kids for half an hour to get out their bed. Then we run about for half an hour, and eventually they're shoved out the door 5 seconds before the bus arrives. And it's a hit and a miss whether they have breakfast most mornings or not. So it's certainly not the experience that I have. And by speaking to other parents, I can certainly assure you it's not the experience they have either. I think theirs is more aligned with what I go through in the morning. And I think a breakfast club, if it was advertised a little bit better, and highlighted to more parents, especially working parents, I think the uptake would be greater. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for those comments. I'm sure the service and the corporate communications team will take those comments on board. Councillor Goldie, Willie?
Thanks, Convener. Just James had actually mentioned a bit of it earlier on there about we do have breakfast clubs that have run for a considerable number of years. To see where there's a drop-off on some of them that were existing pre-COVID, because with people working from home and people furloughed and whatever, it may be a disincentive to send your kids to a breakfast club. It's just to see if we've looked at the stats before the pandemic and compare it to during the pandemic to see if there's a fall-off.
I'm not sure if that level of data has been pulled together. It's maybe something that can be looked at by the service, Willie. James, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I think we do have data on the the numbers that are turning up at the breakfast clubs. And what we can do as well is I'm happy to take on the comments that Councillor sorry, I missed the name of the councillor Mooney, apologies there, is taken up. So again, we'll link in with the schools. The breakfast clubs are promoted on a regular basis, and you know, I'd like to give you that assurance, and certainly if your kids are within the age group, get the three of them along to get the breakfast at the school. But yeah, we'll work with the schools and we'll get that message out again. But the schools are really good at putting that message out in their bulletins, etc., whatever type of thing. But we'll certainly have a look at that and perhaps linking in with corporate communications also.
Okay, thanks very much for that, James. Any other questions? No, I think we've exhausted this agenda item. So can we agree with the recommendations? Thank you very much, colleagues. That takes us on to agenda item number 7, which is a report on ACM and the provisional results for this year. Janie O'Neill is on the call today and is going to take us through this report. So Janie, I'll hand over to you at this point.
Thanks very much, convener, and good afternoon again, everybody. As elected members will know, the exams were cancelled again this year, and planning was put in place by the SQA to avoid the issues which were faced in 2020. So this year awards were based on teacher judgment in terms of evidence of learner attainment, and as a service we worked in line with the SQA advice to create the alternative certification model, the ACM, which I know you would have heard a significant amount about, as a means of supporting schools with this challenging task, because it took a huge amount of time for them to get the young people to the point of their provisional grades. Our ACM, quite early into the process, was subjected to scrutiny by HMI, and we received very positive feedback, and you'll also be able to access, although the authorities aren't named, you will be able to access the document which is referred to in Appendix 1, which is Education Scotland's report on the review of the ACM process. If I could just draw your attention to 2.1 of the report, a short life working group was established to support the alternative certification model and to support schools, which was led by myself as chair, with 2 education and families managers, both very, very experienced, Jackie Cahill and Jan McCrone. We also had secondary head teachers involved, again with experience appropriate to this task, SQA coordinators, which are deputy head teachers in our secondary schools, subject network leads, class teachers, and we also had union representation. I'm pleased to tell you that that group continues to run throughout this session as well. So that was one of the ways that we supported schools. And in addition to that, we also had SQA coordinators meeting weekly with the SQA representative and also with Jackie Cahill, who oversees this from an operational perspective. Schools were encouraged to give young people the best possible chance to succeed, and a range of evidence was used. Assessment and moderation circles were established, and schools were supporting one another within classrooms, within schools, across localities. And again, we received very positive feedback, as I've mentioned, from HMI, but also from key stakeholders, as you would expect. We were talking very regularly to our young people themselves who were going through this experience, most importantly, their parents and carers, and of course the school staff delivering this. One of the things that we had to do as part of the alternative certification model was issue working grades to young people at appropriate points. And we did this in a sensitive way and working in appropriate timing to make sure that they were able to discuss their working grade with their teacher. If, for example, they felt that they could improve that working grade, they wanted to have more opportunities to provide evidence that the teacher could use as part of their judgment about their attainment before submitting the final grade. So this was built into the programme in a very measured way. And again, the feedback we received from the young people who were experiencing this, Derek, myself and the other heads of service met with them, again, as I say, on a regular basis, was that they really welcomed the opportunity to be able to have these discussions. So that was built into it, and as I say, stakeholders' discussions were ongoing, and of course we had very regular meetings with head teachers who were overseeing this in their school. And you'll appreciate that the months of April, May and June really became consumed with this to quite a large extent, and it was really important that our young people, as I say, got the opportunity to demonstrate what they could attain. Table 2.2 shows you the provisional grades that were issued, and those provisional grades were submitted to the SQA on the 26th of June 2021. You will see they're broadly in line with 2020 results, 3+ and 5+ higher showing improvement, so some increases as well from 2016 to 19, And I would like to just draw your attention to advanced higher attainment. Again, you will remember that whilst we'd already planned to move to a digital delivery over the longer term, because of COVID, we of course moved to that very quickly, as opposed to taxing young people to different schools. We were pleased to see that a positive reflection in terms of advanced higher attainment as a result, not as a result, but sorry, despite the digital delivery. And we are very pleased to see that that has been closely monitored again this session. I'd also like to note that we have gathered our own data around our appeals, and one of the measures of success was a significantly low number of appeals, and we have less than 100 appeals across the whole estate, which, as you will appreciate, is a very low number. Our next steps, the Short Life Working Group, as I mentioned earlier, continues, and we've already met this session. We'll continue to support schools throughout this forthcoming session, 21-22, and ensure a rapid response to any changes which may be announced in SQA processes. Excuse me. So I would just ask for elected members to note the report. Thank you very much, and happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Janie. I mean, I think a lot of credit has to go to our young people for their resilience, as was highlighted in previous reports. This has been an incredibly challenging time, but our teachers have also done an incredible amount of work on the ACM across North Lanarkshire. So credit to everyone, and including our officers who've been involved in that process. It's been a challenge in the circumstances, but I think everybody has stepped up to the mark. So I'll open it up to questions at this point, and I see Councillor Johnson. Tom Johnson is the first in the chat bar. Tom.
Thanks, Convener. My question, if you look at 2.1.2, as has already been mentioned, where there was insight training to understand attainment trends and patterns for the schools, and facilitating ongoing discussions with head teachers regarding likely attainment. And then if you look at the actual results there in 2.2, you'll see that it's the hires at 3+ and 5+ where you see this big jump. I think it was about 12% increase in higher pass rates once COVID came in, and it was teacher assessment. So you'll see for 2020 and 2021 that at the hires you see that jump compared with 2019. You don't see it in 6th year so much. You obviously see it in the Nat 3s and the Nat 4s as well. So what I wanted to ask was, in all this work in coordinating, and we're still to get the full sort of league table results in November, is there coordinating going on between the 35 local authorities as well? Or could you be in a situation where one local authority has a big jump in pass rates compared with another one? That's these key ones that where you get the bigger classes at S5, hires 3+ and 4+. Is there a coordination across Scotland in these matters among the local authorities?
Janie, obviously, I'm not sure if you'll have a level of data for the 32 the 31 local authorities. I mean, obviously, there is ongoing dialogue that takes place through the West Partnership. I don't know if Derek or yourself maybe want to touch on that and give some response to Councillor Johnson's question there.
Sure, I'm happy to come in. Thanks very much, Convener. Thanks very much for the question, Councillor Johnson. So in terms of coordination across the other 31 local authorities, no, that is not taken place, but as Convener mentions, of course, we do have the West Partnership, but we've not coordinated the response. The response is based on the evidence that we've received from our young people through the schools using the alternative certification model. So that would be my response to that, and Derek maybe will want to come in if there's anything else to add. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I would say, Councillor Johnson, the quality assurance for this was done through a number of ways. First of all, Education Scotland did a high-level review of local authority arrangements for the alternative certification model. The SQA were engaged locally with different local authorities to make sure that the standards for SQA were applied. And there were 3 levels of quality assurance, as Janie's talked about, those around about classrooms to make sure that teachers were moderating, those across schools to ensure there was cross schools moderation, and there was also, as we say, engagement directly with the head teachers themselves, and the kind of quality assurance we did to make sure things were, broadly speaking, staying on track. And what we know from our discussions, from my discussions at the West Partnership, is, broadly speaking, the results across the West Partnership, I believe, time will show. And obviously, as you say, we are waiting for the full insight publications before we know this absolutely for definite. So I couldn't, give you a 100% guarantee at this stage until I see that data. But the informal feedback we've had from our West Partnership colleagues is we're much in line with where everybody else is. So we're not seeing any huge jumps this year compared to last year. And I think 2 things are probably quite important to say. First of all, there is a kind of protection, if you like, of the historic attainment uplift from last year and a general trend of improvement. But can I also just say, one of the things that struck me, and I think this is probably something that will come out in the public narrative, and it's certainly in there in the OECD reports on Scottish education, we have a number of young people in areas of deprivation who were given a different way to demonstrate their attainment out with the traditional exam system, which requires them to sit in a hall and demonstrate their attainment in ways which are quite traditional. They were given a way to demonstrate their attainment through an alternative certification model, and they were able to do that. And I think we should be really proud of them. And moreover, I'm really proud of the work of the teachers who made that, facilitated that for them. I think there's a lot to be proud of in that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Linden.
Thank you very much, Convener. Can I echo your opening remarks and just note that it's uncharted territory for national and local government in respect of the development of this model against the backdrop of the pandemic, and just reiterate the thanks from my group, certainly, to all those in education and families who've been involved in delivering the model and supporting our young people's learning and teaching, as well as the young people themselves for enjoying such success against that backdrop. 2 questions from me, Convener. Firstly, in relation to section 4.5 of the report, what feedback or assessment has been made of the effectiveness of the communications process, particularly from parents and pupils in relation to the model? And then secondly, and perhaps more substantively, in relation to section 2.2.2 of the report, the poverty-related attainment gap and the wider profile of attainment data that will come forward in November to CMT and to Education and Families Committee. I wondered, in addition to this, will members expect to see that placed into a wider context, particularly around programme of work? I think it's 34, I think, if I remember right, in relation to the standards and quality report that we see every year, if we can expect to see the standards and quality report for 2021 published at that point as well, for members to understand the wider context of this particular model and attainment. Thanks, Convener.
Thanks, Jordan, for those comments and pertinent questions there. And I mean, certainly that would be the expectation moving forward towards the end of the year. Janie, on Councillor Linden's first question, are you happy to pick that up?
Yes, that's fine. Thanks very much, Councillor Linden. So yes, obviously we did have regular communication with the stakeholders, as we've referenced there. And so can I just clarify, you're just asking specifically what analysis we've done around how effective that was? So we're picking up again, you'll appreciate over the summer holidays we didn't have as many opportunities to link in because the deadline date was the 26th of June. So we've had already had our forum with our young people last week, and we've already met also with the Short Life Working Group, and part of the discussion is about how we discuss with our young people, wider than just a pupil forum, going through our schools about their feelings about it. I can tell you just anecdotally, it was of course just the group that we were with, but certainly what came back from the young people was that they had felt it to be a very positive experience. They felt that they were communicated with well, and they felt their schools kept them really well informed. They felt it was dealt with sensitively, and having there's been so much angst around it, obviously not least for the young people themselves. It was actually quite heartening to hear that. And although that was a small sample, we would want to obviously gather more evidence to it, and I would be really hopeful that that would be the overall feedback that we would have. But of course, we would take on board any other comments. And what you said yourself, absolutely, unprecedented. We're going into uncharted waters. So I think for us to have come out of that with those kind of initial comments, and also the small number of appeals, which is exceptionally heartening as well, does give us some evidence at this point, but we'll be happy to give information on more once received, Councillor Linden. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Janie. Councillor Castles. Tom?
Thanks, Chair. Well, the first question maybe a bit unfair to ask is, and I'm quite happy to get an answer to it later on if it can't be answered today, it's just simply, in some areas in the advanced higher can be presented, some subjects can be presented. Were all pupils this year able to be presented at advanced, are being presented in this year in the subjects of their choice in all areas? The second question is, I can only imagine the amount of workload that this involved, developing the internal assessments, but it's about mainly about the external appeals. What was the level of workload? How was that kept manageable for the teachers who had to prepare an external appeal to the SQA? What was the workload cost and what was the financial cost to that? And my second question is in 2.16, the anomalies, just a wee bit more explanation of that. Was that within departments across schools? I see how that mentions how that was dealt with. Just a wee bit more information on the anomalies. Thanks.
Okay, Janie?
Yeah, I'm happy to come in. So in terms of your first question, thanks very much, Councillor Castles. Are you referring to this current session in terms of the number of young people who are able to cover the advanced hires that they've chosen for this year?
Yeah, I think it was difficult. COVID obviously played a part. Pupils couldn't move from one school to another. And I know when it gets to advanced higher, it's difficult in presenting some courses. And sometimes some councils use external reports. I just wonder if everybody got access to the advanced hire that they wanted to, and I appreciate the difficulty to achieve.
Sure. Sorry. And because of the ability that we had to deliver digitally, and obviously we were able to add on to that as we went out throughout the session, indeed this year as well, we are able, because we're no longer restricted, if you like, in terms of our travelling to locality. We're able to offer now courses, for example, to a young person in Bells Hill is able to access an advanced higher chemistry in Greenfields that previously we wouldn't have commuted them to, as you can understand, for good reason, unless in exceptional circumstances. However, now, because of the digital delivery, we are able to open it up a lot more to our young people. So in fact, it's actually improved choices, the way that we're delivering this as a direct result of the way we had to move to. In terms of, for this session, drilling into the data, I would need to come back to you on that to give specific numbers, because as you'll know, Councillor Castles, at the beginning of the session, it can sometimes take a few weeks for things to settle down around young people and the courses they want to do because of the choices that they're making. So actually my colleague Ronnie Bowie has been meeting with deputy head teachers this week to get the final settled numbers and that, and I can feed back to you. Happy to do that. In terms of the second question around external appeals, again, I could come back to you on that. Of course, young people were able to make their own appeals directly this year. That was one of the changes, but also in terms of the other information you're looking for, I would probably need to just get a wee bit more information from our SQA coordinators around that one as well, if that's okay. And I can answer the question on anomalies just now, you'll be glad to hear. So that question that you're asking there for 2.1.6, that would be, yes, exactly what you've actually said. So if we were looking and there was something that would appear to us, as in any quality assurance process in previous years, pre-COVID, we would be looking at the attainment and something seemed a bit exceptional, then obviously there would be further conversations around that. We'd be just looking to see what the reason might be, and some of the reasons are there noted as well around staff delivering courses, changes, whatever it might well be. So we did have those ongoing conversations, but that would be something that we would have been doing actually, to be fair, anyway, in the analysis of and during attainment reviews. So that's really what that's referencing there, Councillor Castles. I hope that answers your question, but happy to take any follow-up.
Yeah, thank you.
Derek, do you want to maybe just add anything to that?
Specifically on the workload question, Councillor Castles, if it's okay, I do think that what the teachers did last year was tremendous across the country, but I'm specifically obviously most interested in the teachers in North Lanarkshire and what they did. And bear in mind that we only really had the agreements in place for an alternative certification model from December last year, and that was for National 5, and it was only really you know, into January and February that we started to understand that the exam system would have to be replaced by something else. So from there to the end of June, on a very tight timeline, quite a remarkable effort to pull all that together. So I've got no doubt there was workload in the whole process. And I suppose there probably was some additional workload in the presentation of additional material for in the form of whatever had to be put through the appeals process. But bear in mind that last year we had 14,000 occasions where a child had to self-isolate and 1,000 occasions where a teacher had to self-isolate. So we had significant disruption in the system, and we still held a really robust system that got all our young people with the accreditation that they required, and we've only got less than 100 appeals, and we've protected the historic attainment. So I have to say, at all levels, our system has worked extremely well. I'm really proud of the head teachers for their work, proud of the teachers for their work. I'm also proud of the work of the central team and their oversight of this, because this really was a high, high stakes process that was delivered to a very high standard, I believe, and I think that the team deserves a lot of credit for it.
Thanks very much, Derek. Nathan Wilson.
Thank you, convener. Where am I? Sorry. I've got a number of points I would just like to raise on the report, and a few questions. The paper makes reference to the difficulties that emerged in 2020 with the SQ8 algorithms used to award people's grades. Before this was reversed, and the consequence, a different form of assessment was intended to be used this year. As members may be aware, it was highlighted at the Scottish Parliament back in June that a large number of local authorities were looking at the previous performance of schools to potentially adjust pupils' grades, and an Education Scotland report published at that time highlighted 3 and 4 councils would be assessing the results awarded to pupils based on historical attainment data. In effect, what this meant was instead of the SQA reducing pupils' grades, the system in place could force schools and teachers to do it. It's not entirely clear from the report, but I think Derek has touched on it in a few of his answers. But I would appreciate just some further clarification on whether in North Lanarkshire grades were awarded to pupils based solely on the marks they secured on assessments undertaken in the classroom and teacher judgment, or if historical data was used quite widely to analyse and in some cases reduce the initial results achieved by students. The second question I have is to ask whether a uniform approach was taken across all secondary schools in North Lanarkshire to the particular types of assessments used in the absence of formal exams, or if schools were able to diverge. From recollection, I'm aware of some other examples in Scotland of schools from the same local authority did adopt a different approach towards assessment. So I'm just wondering whether that flexibility or divergence existed here locally. And thirdly, can officers advise if the assessments pupils were asked to undertake in North Lanarkshire for the purposes of awarding qualifications were equivalent to traditional classroom non-exam based assessments, or if instead they were conducted under very similar conditions to formal exams? Again, I'm aware of examples in other parts of the country where the assessment approach pursued was basically traditional exams in all but name. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for those questions, Nathan. I mean, I think officers have tried to cover most of those issues, but I will ask Derek just to come back in on some of your specific points there and just give absolute clarity on the position.
Joe, Councillor Wilson, as a teacher, I get a bit frustrated by some of the public narratives around assessment. Teacher professional judgment was a system we used this year. But as a teacher, as an English teacher, I would always look back at historic attainment and planning the approach I took towards assessment. Why would you not? That's just standard practice if you present candidates for hires. Of course you do. In this occasion, I can categorically say teacher professional judgment was the system we used. However, we had layers of quality assurance to support those judgments and to make sure our staff did the other thing you mentioned, which was how fair and consistent was it. So I'd said to head teachers, and I've said it publicly, I've said it and I'll say it here, I wanted three things. I wanted to get behind progressive learning and teaching that really captured the successes of children and young people. So did we do that? Yes, I think we did. But secondly, I wanted it to be fair. And I wanted it to be based on a system that I could genuinely say was fair across the piece in North Lanarkshire. And thirdly, I wanted it to be rigorous and based on effective assessment instruments. But fourthly, if there was a fourth thing going into that third thing, it had to be based on the fact that I've had 14,000 children self-isolating through the course of last year. They were coming at this set of qualifications from totally different angles, and schools were allowed under the SQA conditions to be flexible in the design of assessment instruments to allow the young people to show what they could do. And I think we did that. And through you, Chair, I think I'll pass over to Janie at this point and she'll maybe give a bit more detail just about how the kind of schools approached the assessment in the short life group that oversaw this and made sure that it was fair.
Thanks very much, Derek, and hope that's okay, Convener. I'll just come in. So yes, we had our assessment and moderation groups, which worked really, really well. And in fact, despite the fact that the SQA has announced that exams will go ahead this year, one of the first things that was brought back to the short life working group is that they would like to continue in some schools to have these assessment and moderation circles because they found them to be so effective. So I would say that absolutely teacher judgment is what was used. And again, as Derek said, obviously as a former teacher myself as well, you would be looking back at attainment, you would always be looking at historical evidence, but you would absolutely be looking at what the young people has produced, particularly in the COVID background and the evidence that they have of their attainment. And we had the SQA itself released last year's 2020's unused examination papers, which they had said as part of the alternative certification model could be used in schools. And as with any test or assessment, you would expect it to be done under certain conditions. However, that would not be, they were not, took your point about, and obviously there was a lot of media attention around this about exams by any other name. However, we were not sitting exams in the SQE sense of the word, as we're all aware, but young people were being, their evidence was being gathered, as you would expect, within classrooms where they would be asked not to be using books to support their answers, etc., as you would expect. That hasn't changed over a while. So I would say to you that teacher judgment, it was based on the evidence that they gathered, but it was absolutely based on teacher judgment. And I hope that answers your question, Councillor Wilson. Thank you very much. Thank you, Convener.
Thanks, Janie, Derek, and Nathan for your question.
I appreciate those answers, Frank. Can I just
I'll let you come back in, Nathan. Apologies.
Just to make a very quick supplementary point, and I'm glad to hear that teacher judgment was largely the basis for awarding result. But just thinking back to what unfolded last year in August 2020 with the results, and when certainly in my view very legitimate public concerns were raised, what would worry me is whether there are cases that high-performing pupils in schools from a more disadvantaged area have been penalised and downgraded on the basis of historical attainment data where that's been used. And I very much hope and expect that this will not have been prevalent in North Lanarkshire this year. Thanks.
I think, in fairness, I think the officers have given as much clarification as they can in relation to this point, Nathan. Obviously, this is something that was an incredibly emotive issue last year. There was a lot of public challenges around it. In fairness, there was action taken to rectify that, and that process is ongoing at a national level. And what we have always done here in North Lanarkshire is put the needs and the ambitions of our young people front and centre, and that's what we'll continue to do. So at this point, I see no further questions. So I'll ask if we can agree the recommendations. And that takes us on to agenda item number 8, which is Keeping the Promise, the Care Foundation. Alison Gordon is on the call, and I'll ask Alison if she can touch on some of the points within this report. Alison, over to you.
Thanks, convener, and afternoon, everybody. So this report provides an update on a range of improvement activity which is linked with the Care Foundation of the Promise. Members have been briefed fully on the Promise in previous reports to committee, and since we last met, the Promise has published, in addition to its plan for the first 3 years of the National Transformation Programme, a change programme which assesses progress to date, but also provides a support offer to local areas in terms of delivery. One of the things that's part of that offer is access to something called the Promise Design School, which supports us work using the Scottish model of service design, which is very collaborative in terms of young people being at the centre. And I'm glad to say that we've got 2 of our Promise development workers who are linking with that going forward. So I'm not going to go over all of the detail of the report, but you'll see that there is reference to a range of improvement activity that is taking place within the service. A lot of that is driven by the Promise team. I've spoken before about the core of that team being a number of development workers that we have that have got lived experience of care. We have, over the last period of time, reconfigured our central services management team to ensure that we've got a core team and that are supporting those workers drive forward some of this activity. You'll see from the report they've been involved in a range of different aspects of work, but maybe if I can focus on 1 or 2. One of them involves work in relation to refreshing and I suppose to some extent revolutionising the way that we keep young people's records for those that are experiencing care away from home. Those records hold the history for those young people, and it's really important that they have that history just like any other child has. So there's been a lot of innovative work done so far with our children's houses, changing the format of how we keep records, making that more child friendly, instituting memory boxes, etc. And although that seems something that's quite bureaucratic, I don't think we can diminish the importance of that to our young people. The development team have all been also involved in work around specific mentoring and reviewing our secure procedures for those few young people who require that level of care, and again trying to ensure that is integrated with the new secure care standards, and that we take a very personalised approach to those young people as well, whilst upholding their rights absolutely. One of the significant changes since last we've discussed this element of programme of work has been new legislation that came into place in July that put additional obligations onto the local authority and partners in relation to supporting brothers and sisters maintain contact, and wherever possible when they require to be supported away from home, to be placed together. That might seem something that's self-evident that we would want to do, but the reality is the complexity of our families, some of the challenges we have resource-wise, means that we historically haven't achieved that for all of our young people in the way that we would want. So there's a lot of activity happening, and again our development workers are involved in that, in trying to improve what we deliver in this respect for our young people. So in terms of briefing for our adoption and family placement panel, and for staff in doing new focus groups with carers and with young people in terms of development sessions, and also work that we are doing with housing colleagues in relation to a protocol for housing, because some of our carers do find challenges in accommodating larger families. So a lot of work around about that being taken forward, and that's something that will continue over the coming period. We continue to do improvement work around kinship care, and working closely with the third sector and our CL&D colleagues to make sure that we've got the right support in place for kinship carers and that they have the same access to family support that other families have. And that's really critical as well. And we're also doing some work to I suppose, reorganise the way that our different carers teams are run and integrate them further. And the aim of that is to make sure that we have a flexible but consistent offer to support carers, whether they're carers who are providing care in residential children's houses, whether they're supported carers caring for older young people, whether they're foster carers, adopters or kinship carers. And we're looking to have staff work together in a much more integrated way to support transitions and make sure that that our crisis support, transition support and our general offer of support for carers who do such an important job is improved. Finally, there's reference to our virtual school that's co-located with our children's carers teams and links closely with those. But one of the other areas of work that's highlighted and you'll hear more about later in Anne Monroe's report is the offer of support that the virtual school made over the summer to young people who were experiencing care, which was very much aligned to the 365 programme. So there's a range of detail there about all of these areas of work. I won't say any more about that just now, but simply ask committee to note the report and the direction of travel. I'm happy to take any questions, convener.
Thanks very much, Alison. I have two questions at the moment, one from Councillor Mooney and then from Councillor Linden. So Nora, over to you.
Thanks very much, convener, and thank you to Alison for a great report. Alison mentioned briefly about memory boxes there, and you know, after a meeting that we had with the Care Champion last month, this is something we've actually discussed quite a lot in our house, because we take it for granted that quite a lot of us take photos of our children, and when they grow up they can reflect on how they looked at certain ages, their first day at school, etc. But children in care very often don't have that, and it you know, it's really sad to think that someone leaving care and going out on their own, getting their first job, getting their first house, and then looking back, their life kind of starts really whenever they leave care, because they've not got any photos, they've not got any, you know, memories, treasures that they can take with them. So I think it's actually a lovely idea. I actually feel quite emotional talking about it, but I think it's a really lovely idea that we're adapting this into our policy within North Lanarkshire, and I hope other councils maybe take note of that and start to put it into their policies too. So it's more of a comment rather than a question. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Nora. I think you're absolutely right in the comment that you've made there. So thanks very much for that. Councillor Linden.
Thanks very much, convener. Just some comments and a question, if you don't mind indulging me, convener. Firstly, just in relation to the narrative in the report, particularly section 1, I just want to welcome the continued presence of the promise on the Education and Families agenda in recent months, particularly since motion to full council, and compliment the officers for continuing to put it at the heart of our agenda. I think it's so important that care experienced young people, you know, are seen to be and continue to be at the heart of our council's corporate agenda. I think it's incredibly important. I just wanted to also note the excellent work of the Promise Development team, particularly how Beth Ann and Dylan have kind of hit the ground running and are working across the corporate council to really raise the profile of the work that they are doing. It wouldn't be me if I didn't have a slight bugbear, Alison. I did sort of somewhat chortle at section 1.2, where towards the end it talks about the stigma which can arise from the traditional language used within the care system about children, young people and their families. And one phrase came to mind immediately when I read that, And then I was flicking through Twitter just a short time ago, convener, and Ryan McShane, who's a local care experience activist from Coatbridge, was tweeting and reflecting on his discomfort or frustration at the use of the term looked after in the Scottish Parliament. And then I saw section 2.4 of this report and saw looked after away from home care team and the continued use of the phrase looked after within the report. And I just think, for me, we must try, whether or not the legislation or statutory language uses the phrase looked after, we really must try and do better to use a different phrase. There's no reason why it can't be cared for away from home care team. And that narrative change from something being done to someone that looked after, rather than the loving care language that we want to start to see shine through. And I hope that's something that we can all strive for in future reports. Finally, convener, in relation to my question, thanks for indulging me, question relates to section 1.3 of the report. And I know there was a meeting recently with the Promise National team on a feedback loop. And I wondered what the feedback for North Lanarkshire Council was as a result of that dialogue. Any examples of good practice from the national Promise team, but perhaps areas where we can go further quicker as well to challenge ourselves to fulfil elements of the promise. Thanks, convener.
Thanks very much, Jordan. A couple of points there. Alison, you happy to pick that up?
Yes, absolutely. I note the point on language, and you'll know, Councillor Linden, that we've made, I think, quite significant strides on that, but it does slip through from time to time, and it's important that that's pointed out. So that's fair enough. It's language that the team were using, but we'll pick that up. In relation to engagement with the Promise nationally, there's a reference to this in the next report as well. So we've had we've got engagement at a number of different levels. So our Promise development workers have their own links to the national team. We are linking as part of the Promise partnership because we gained a smaller amount of funding. Remember, we referenced last time in relation to doing some specific work around awareness raising and also about data and records. One of the things that was fed back in relation to our application was around participation in the design school. We're lucky enough, because of our development workers' national connections, that we managed to get 2 places rather than 1 on that design school in the first instance. But I've also met, only last week, Beth and I met with two of the Promise national team to really look at, can we get access to some wider support around that area, because it's important that we jointly take responsibility for delivering on the promise, and that's not solely left with our development workers to do. So we wanted the whole team to be working and to benefit from that support. And that's something that, when they have the capacity to do, the Promise team national will come back to us on. There will be an exchange and there'll be an ideas bank, which we will take advantage of, but just to see, as part of the national round of engagement as well, Derek and I met with a couple of the key leads from the Promise team. They are particularly interested in some of the work we are doing to improve our data, but also in particular some of the work that I'll reference in the next report around shifting activity upstream, and both from a specific programme of work to do with the Promise perspective, so some of the work we're doing around family support, but also about how that fits with the Council's wider commitment and the plan for North Lanarkshire. So in particular, they are hoping that we will engage with them as one of only 3 local authority areas to do work on human and economic cost modelling, and in return will support us with data analysis and support about how we shift that balance, how we move activity upstream, how we engage effectively at the earliest stage, and how we learn from children and families about the best way of supporting them. So that's one of the things where they saw potential in the work they're doing, and they are keen to work with us further on going forward.
Thanks very much, Alison, for that. Are you happy with that, Jordan?
Many thanks, convener.
Thank you. Councillor Brannan McVeigh. Heather, over to you.
Thanks very much, Convener. And I think it's following on in some ways from Councillor Mooney's point regarding the importance of your personal archive, you know, and I'm wondering that, yes, memory boxes are wonderful, but what about having young people being able to have access to like a digital memory box as well? You know, the traditional box is like you literally, it's a box, you put stuff in it, and that's great, but that can be problematic when you're moving. But if there's, and I would certainly advocate that having those things that are tangible, you know, you can feel, you can touch, whether it be the corner off of your favourite jumper when you were wee, or, you know, a tooth that fell out that you keep in a locket, or whatever it is. That's important. But also, we get so many things, so many children get feedback about their learning experiences or their participation through how things are shared, whether it be through Sway newsletters or Twitter accounts for their school. Even if they're emojied up at the face for anonymity, they know that it's them. And it's if there's a way for that channel to be created, if everybody had their own cloud or something that was protected for them, that it could travel and be updated as they go along, that creates that personal archive. Because I think it is about modelling, and it is about future proofing. It's not about somebody having, you know, 25 different boxes and these things. You know, it's just about how do we future proof so that archive that should be through a life that could last up till they're, you know, 25, that's there for them in a multifaceted approach. But I think it's so immensely important. Gone are the days where a child moves, you know, with a black bin liner from one place to another. Thank goodness those days are behind us. But let's make sure that positive memories can travel too, because the other ones, we can decide what we do with them later, but let's make sure that these emotive positive ones can travel. So it's just to put a plea in there for some of the traditional views of the box, but also perhaps a digital or otherwise, and just to hear if there's been any exploration of that.
Thanks very much, Heather. Alison, do you want to maybe pick up on Heather's points here? Anything you would like to add, maybe something to consider moving forward?
Thank you, I will, Convener, and that's an excellent point and an idea. I think we may have touched on some of that, but I don't know really if in as much in the way that you're suggesting, Councillor Brannan McVeigh. So it's something I'll take back to the team who are working on it. I know that we're looking at various strands, and some of that is still physical things and the sort of traditional memory box. But we have very much updated the way we engage with our young people using Momo, etc. So it's how we save some of that. We're also looking at the way that we record and access to records. So our young people have been involved in the work that we're doing around commissioning a new case management system, which sounds very bureaucratic. It is, but there's an issue about how young people can access that and influence what's recorded as well. And I think that also links with what they take with them and how their ownership of their records. And that's something we're keen to do as well. But very specifically, the issue about maximising what we can do digitally, I'll take back to the team who are working on that as something for further exploration if they've not already picked up on that.
That's great. Thanks very much, Alison, and thanks, Heather, for that contribution as well. I see no further comments or questions in the chat bar. Are we happy to agree the recommendations? That's great. Thank you very much, colleagues. That moves us on to agenda item number 10. Sorry, I think I'm getting ahead of myself here. Moves us on to agenda item number 9, which is our second report on keeping the promise, and this is support for families, children and young people on page 155. Alison, can you just touch on the salient points within this report? Again, a very positive report, and with them we'll open it up to any questions that members may have.
Okay, thanks, Convener. And first of all, can I apologise? I think there's a misnumbering of the paragraphs in this report. So you've got section 2.5s. So apologies for that. Nobody's pulled me up for it yet, but I may as well confess first of all to that. So this report really, hopefully people will see as complementary to the report that I've just discussed, and it very much addresses the improvement activity that we're undertaking in relation to the further strand of the promise. The context and the background is much the same as the previous report. I would want to emphasise, though, the commitment that we have to this locally, I think, is reinforced by the fact that our new Children's Services Plan, which was just published recently, is very much built around, and therefore partners are committing to, as well as the local authority, is very much built around the foundations of the promise and UNCRC. So this particular report focuses on that, the sort of family support and the more upstream activity. Also how we're engaging children, young people and families, and maybe just in referencing the Children's Services Plan, I would want to emphasise too about a much more collaborative approach going forward. We have a new subgroup that deals with voice, and two of our subgroups, the one on voice and care, will be co-chaired with young people with either lived experience or young people themselves in terms of voice. So the report deals with 4 strands of improvement activity that we're taking forward in relation to family support, which have in common a desire to intervene early and effectively with families to, I suppose, avoid children requiring to be cared for away from home where possible, but also to improve outcomes for our children and young people and life opportunities. So the first of those you heard about last time in committee and deals with the direct payment and support scheme that we delivered at the beginning of the year using some of the additionality that was provided through additional COVID monies through Winter Support Plan and pandemic response. You will remember that what we did with that to try and ensure that we were addressing some of the disproportionate adverse impacts of the pandemic on children with particular vulnerabilities and poorer families is that we provided support through small direct budgets and delivered through strength-based conversations with our social work team, but also with our schools and head teachers. And what it provided was very much personalised support, tailored support to individual families, and we reached almost 2,000 families in that way. Why this is detailed again in this report really is because we have had an evaluation that we undertook with CELSIS, and some of the information arising from that evaluation is included in the report in the graphs at 2.5, which give you some sense of just the range of areas where families identified they were struggling, and how they spent the money very much reflected on what mattered to them and what would make a difference to them. And what you'll also see in one of the graphs is the impact that that relatively small amount of money had for those children and families, particularly in relation to their general sense of well-being and addressing stress and anxieties that they were carrying through the pandemic. We're hoping to take the learning from that into how we deliver family support more generally, as well as to do some longitudinal work around that. And that's one of the areas that I was referencing in relation to Councillor Linden's point earlier, where there was some national interest really from the Social Inclusion Partnership and from the Promise team about how we can do more of that and shift intervention in upstream in a way that's really empowering for families. One of the ways we hope to do that going forward is linking it with family group decision making and looking at if we can create capacity to work in that way with some of the families who are on the edges of care, or where we are just trying to support children to transition back home, again having experienced care away from home. So you'll see in paragraphs 2.9 to 2.13 of the report some updated information about what's being delivered through our family group decision making work, and in particular in terms of supporting rehabilitation plans for children and young people. There's also information in the report about activity we've undertaken through the Community Mental Health and Wellbeing Framework monies, which are temporary monies that we are provided with to from a partnership perspective to support upstream work in relation to mental health and wellbeing. Very much complements some of the the work and the needs that Gerard was referencing earlier, in the work that we're doing around GIRFEC and addressing some of the issues that are emerging through the SDQ questionnaire. And you'll see that actually, to complement the work that's ongoing around counselling in schools and the work that's ongoing through CAMS, we've done quite a lot of work with our school clusters and third sector to improve general wellbeing work and to try, I suppose, and prevent escalation of difficulties around mental health and wellbeing that children and families are experiencing. The other thing that we've done, and was really a challenge through this framework, was to deliver services that were more flexible, and we've been doing that through our community learning and development team and through our intensive services team out of hours. And finally, there's reference in the report to work that we're doing around a review of youth justice. We've spoken previously about work we've done around contextual safeguarding, but some of the young people who we come into contact with us because of their offending also have very complex welfare needs. And it's important that we try and do our best to ensure that they are not further criminalised through the fact that they're in touch with ourselves and in some instances are experiencing care. We have a new set of standards to measure ourselves again in relation to youth justice. And there are real challenges in the community in relation to criminal exploitation. And we're really reviewing our services in the way that they connect to make sure that, as well as our contextual safeguarding work, we're doing all we can so that we are intervening as effectively as possible with that group of young people as well. So that's the four main strands that the report covers. Again, I'm happy to take any questions on any of these.
Thanks very much again, Alison, for that comprehensive report. I see one question, sorry, two now, in the chat bar. I'll come to Councillor Kelly first. Paul.
Thanks, Convener. I also just touched on the point you just made there about the youth justice services and the 2.19, the 36% of referrals have been higher than comparator local authorities. And just to see, do you feel that the steering group and the kind of actions that you'll hopefully be able to take might go some way to addressing some of those issues and supporting our young people, just to see if that's something we should in future get an update on and how it's going?
Yes, Councillor Kelly. Although persistent offending by young people has reduced in our area as well as other areas over time, there are still some young people who are involved in criminal activity, sometimes through criminal exploitation, but almost universally those young people also face other challenges as well. So it's really important that we look at their needs and look at how we can intervene effectively, through a coordinated response across our services and also between our youth justice and adult justice systems. That there is a correlation too between some of the young people who experience the biggest challenges and family situations where there maybe is older siblings or other family members are involved in criminality, or that they're exposed to risk in the community. So we absolutely will be looking through the review. Are we getting it right across the different dimensions of intervention for those young people, and trying to make sure that we're not criticizing them further, because as I say, we also know that being in care itself makes it more likely that you will pick up charges as a young person for things that may happen in the community or in a family situation that you may not otherwise bring to the attention of the police in those settings. So we want to give everybody a fair start. So absolutely, we'll bring back an update on that activity to committee and let you know both of any successes in moving things forward, but any future challenges as well.
Thanks very much, Alison. Councillor Barclay, Claire?
Thanks. I'm not sure whether Councillor Kelly would want to agree, but it's amazing how often we're actually on the same wavelength. So the question I was going to ask was the same thing. So thanks for that, Paul, and thanks, Alison, not only for that answer, but for the report again in general. I think how important it is that we have our young people as part of this decision-making process and how we move forward on this. So thanks again for a really, really good report. And thanks, Paul, for your question, and Alison for your answer.
Thanks very much, Claire. Councillor Mooney, Nora.
Thanks very much, Convener. It's a question about 2.6, if that's okay, about the £30,000 budget that was made available within the summer programme for social workers. You know, I think it's great that we've given our teams autonomy to make those decisions. I'm a wee bit concerned about the subjectiveness of it and the consistency in terms of the allocation. You know, how was the money split up throughout North Lanarkshire? Was there certain areas that got more than others? How was that decision made? Was there any trends in how the money was actually spent by the people? And also, was the full £30,000 spent, or is there still some remaining that can still be distributed? Thank you.
Okay. So thanks, Councillor Mooney, for that question. So I guess we learned in that from the bigger project, obviously, that we undertook at the beginning of the year. But that particular programme and that allocation of money was really targeted at those young people who needed a very tailored support and where their needs couldn't be met by the other extensive offers through the summer programme that Anne will go on to detail later on in this committee. So we had specific offers from the virtual school, as I've referenced earlier, as well as a wide range of offers that were open to children with additional support needs and more generally. So it really was for workers to identify those small number of children or young people who, for whatever individual reason, couldn't benefit or couldn't engage where they were at in terms of their journey at the moment, meant that they couldn't engage effectively with those other offers. I don't have the detailed breakdown just now. I think we're still working through that. It's something that Gerard also, having had a look at and being involved in some of the discussions about individuals, might have a little bit more up-to-date information than myself on in relation to that. But that's certainly something we'll be analysing in terms of the spend. But as you'll see from the analysis of the previous spend, it was very individual. In terms of consistency, we do give a framework to staff in terms of to support their decision making on that, and we expect local managers to be satisfied that there aren't other sources of income that could have been used or support that could have been used. But part of the design of this service, this way of supporting families, is an element of trust, both with families and with the staff, that they know the families best, that they can have those conversations, and that they have some flexibility without a system that's too bureaucratic to offer that support, so we can get support to families quickly. And in terms of going forward, we are hoping that we can find within our budget configuration some money. We've got some carryover from last year, but we're hoping we'll be able to support, as I said, some degree of working in this way going forward, supporting families potentially as using individual budgets to support avoidance of care or transitioning from care. And I think we will build our evidence base, and we'll continue to review that evidence base around the effectiveness of that way of working.
Thanks very much, Alison. Councillor Linden is next in the chat bar. Jordan.
Thanks very much, Convener. Just very briefly, an observation and then a question. I mean, when you look at section 2.5 and the purchases that are made, I think that brings home the nature and importance of the resource. I mean, when you look at the kind of top 10, clothes, furniture, household bills and food are
Thanks very much for those comments and questions. Alison, can you answer the questions that Councillor Lindon's posed there?
I will do, and apologies, Councillor Mooney, I missed one of the points that you raised earlier, which was how money was split across different areas, and just to say on the summer scheme that we gave an indicative amount for each locality, but there was some flexibility within the budget within that to move it to where the need was, but it allowed people to plan based on that indicative amount per area. So back to your points, Councillor Lindon, what we're trying to do just now is look at creating capacity within our budgets. We don't have the I suppose the level of money sitting that we had the advantage of having back in January, but we are trying to create some capacity that will allow us effectively to invest to save, really, in relation to adopting this approach and intervening more effectively, and I suppose also stopping the cliff edge for children who may be coming out of care and who may find themselves with families who don't have the same level of financial resource that was open to the children when they were in care either. So we are looking to provide a framework for staff which would allow them, as part of planning for a child and family, and we would use our normal planning arrangements, but include within that family group decision making, the capacity where they need more tailored support to allocate a budget to the family within which to plan within, and that would allow some, I suppose, purchased support, practical support, activity-based, support for joint families activities, etc. Whatever actually meets the needs of that individual situation to be planned with a child and their family, as part of either supporting them deal with challenges and crisis that maybe brought them to the point of being on the edges of care, or would support them, a child perhaps moved from kinship or foster care back into a family setting. And that would be something that would be closely monitored through our planning process, but would again be built on the principles of empowerment, strength-based conversations and trust. Ideally, we would like to, and this is where you asked about Scottish Government interest in this and the feedback, we have presented to Strategic Leads in Children's Services Planning. We have presented to the Scottish Inclusion Partnership, who, as you know, have also got interests in areas like basic income, etc., around the advantages of this. It's partly why we've decided that although it will be limited, we'll try and do some longitudinal work around or evaluation around the work we did back in January. But the early feedback is that it very much fits with the principles of the promise in terms of its approach to family support. And as I mentioned earlier, it's one of the things that has attracted the promise team nationally to want to engage with us around that human and economic cost modelling. And for members who's not familiar with that, that's really about looking at how we across the board can shift our spend to earlier intervention, and bridge the gap where we need to at the moment meet obviously the most intensive needs and critical needs, but we need to if we're not going to be in a vicious circle in future, we really need to get upstream, and that's the bit that's attracting interest really, and the Promise team nationally want to engage with us on.
Thank you for that, Alison, for that answer. I think Councillor London's satisfied with that. Okay, thank you. I see no further questions at the moment, so can we agree the recommendations contained within the report? Thank you very much, colleagues. That takes us on to agenda item number 10, an update on tackling domestic abuse and the partnership delivery arrangements that we have in place. Alison will touch on the points within this report, and then we'll open it up to questions. Alison? Alison, you're on mute at the moment.
Thank you very much. So thanks, convener. And again, this is a subject that we have discussed at the last two committees. Partly we're a little bit out of sync with our reports because obviously there was a request to bring an additional report back last time. So this report is a follow-up to those that was presented to committee in February and May. It really deals with two main issues: an update on our improvement activity and giving members concern an update on arrangements around commission services and also the impact on local women's aid organisations. The background by now members will be familiar with, a position where we have a high prevalence of domestic abuse in North Lanarkshire with a critical impact on our children and our families and communities, and an area where there has been a particular focus during the pandemic as well, where if anything concerns around domestic abuse and its impact were exacerbated. I've reported previously on the fact that our response to that locally has been to adopt a whole system approach that looks about not just at trying to be effective in our response to domestic abuse or in terms of safeguarding and support, but that also has a focus on both primary and tertiary prevention. So at 2.1 to 2.5 of the report, you'll see an update on the various strands of improvement activity we're taking forward, including the commitment to a restructure of the violence against women group strategic arrangements, which had been paused due to the pandemic, and the development of a revised strategy across the partnership, which I expect will mirror the whole system approach that we've agreed to adopt as a local authority. That work goes wider than domestic abuse and covers other areas of violence against women, but as absolutely important to our joint commitment to move this forward. There is information in the report about our MARAC process, which is the vehicle by which interagency partners try and ensure that we assess and support and respond to the highest levels of risk in relation to domestic abuse. We've recently engaged with the Safe Lives Project nationally and have about our MARAC process being something that's been in place in North Lanarkshire for a long period of time. That's around multi-agency risk assessment conferencing. As a result of the Safe Lives engagement, we have an improvement plan which will support us tweak some of our operational arrangements for most effectiveness. We are also, as a partnership, looking at whether we need to further resource the MARAC process to get best value out of that. In the interim, the new commission service, AURA, is along with Women's Aid, EVA and Assist, continuing to offer independent domestic abuse advocacy to women and other victims that are referred into the MARAC process. Other areas of improvement activity that are covered relate to our interventions with perpetrators of domestic abuse. I've spoken previously about the work we're doing with our justice services Justice and Children and Families are engaging to look at the potential of rolling out a non-mandated programme. So that's for those perpetrators who are not involved with us through the justice system. Another area which is critical, I suppose, to our whole system approach, and where we are really, I think, getting onto the front foot, is the work that we're doing around mentors and violence prevention. So you'll see details in the report of a 3-year development plan that will see this rolled out to all secondary schools in North Lanarkshire, and moving on from that to looking at effective work with the upper age groups of primary too. And lastly, there is some good news in the report about the success we've had with an application to the Delivering Equally Safe Fund for support to further embed the Safe and Together approach in North Lanarkshire. So that's an approach that involves a sort of child-centred work and partnership with the non-abusing parent, really, to support families who have experienced domestic abuse and address the impacts on children. And we were successful in gaining 2-year funding from this October to allow us to roll out accredited training across the children and families workforce across a range of agencies. So finally, the report provides a bit of an update on the rollout of our new commission service through ORA and SACRO. You'll see information on there about the consolidation of the staff team that are supporting that service. That's through staff who've tripped over from Women's Aid, as well as the appointment of a new manager and team. And you'll also see some information there about the initial referrals to that service, which is being monitored regularly through our central team. So you'll see that the service is offering a holistic service, and in the first 7 weeks received 90 referrals into the service. We'll continue to monitor that. And ORA will begin to engage with wider partners and the wider work that's happening in North Lanarkshire. And finally, there's an update on Women's Aid. You will see, and I appreciate that members have been concerned about the impact of the award of the contract to ORA on the viability of Women's Aid services in North Lanarkshire. Women's Aid, the 3 individual Women's Aid services, whilst there is still some uncertainty about their future model and delivery arrangements, have been very clear to us as a partnership that in the interim they will continue to be involved both within the partnership and in delivering the range of activity that they had delivered previously in North Lanarkshire. There is still some uncertainty around their funding, but all 3 organisations were successful in applications to the Delivering Equally Safe Fund nationally for funding. I don't have the detail, they haven't chosen to share the detail of that as yet, but that's something that will be worked through in time, and therefore we'll continue to partner with them going forward in that wider work that we're doing locally. Again, a report for noting, but happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Alison. Councillor Fotheringham, Fiona.
Thanks, Convener. It was just to ask a few questions first of all, if I can, and maybe come back in, if that is okay.
No problem at all.
Fabulous. So 1.3 and 2.1 of or 2.10 of the report. There is obviously reference to Women's Aid throughout the report, and there is that one section about it. I'm just a bit disappointed that in that section on Women's Aid, there's not actually a lot of detail about discussions taking place or any progress being made. Section 1.3 and 2.10 refers to Women's Aid as being a key strategic partner in a valued organisation. It states there that discussions were ongoing around elements of future service agreements, and Council will continue to engage and work with Women's Aid. So it was just to get an update on any progress with this, because it's not really detailed within the report. 2.10 also states that an offer was made to facilitate a meeting with ORA, I've been told that at that point the transfer of understanding was not complete and Women's Aid felt it was inappropriate at that time. So is there plans to facilitate this again? And 4.6 is maybe a bit of confusion about the possibility of confusion. Has there been confusion? Is Council still actively referring to the Women's Aid and other potential agencies? And is this choice still available? So that would be great to start with. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Fiona. A few questions here. Alison, are you happy to pick them up? Alison, you're on mute.
Apologies. I'm clearly not being efficient this afternoon, so apologies for that. So in relation to the discussions with Women's Aid, we've had a number of discussions with Women's Aid, and we have links through direct our leads within the service, as well as we've obviously had some formal discussions as part of the transition. We also continue to work with Women's Aid, who are part of our wider Violence Against Women partnership, who are part of ARAC arrangements, who are part of DISTAS arrangements, etc. So they are very much still involved in all elements of partnership activity. We have offered to meet with the organisations individually should they want to discuss their individual positions with us. They have chosen not to do that today, and any discussions have been with them jointly. And again, similarly, they had chosen not to, although there was an offer through the Violence Against Women group to discuss applications to the Delivering Equally Safe Fund, they've not chosen to bring that in detail into the public domain in relation to that. But what they have very clearly told us is that they do not want, based on the information that was suggesting they may have difficulties providing services, a message to go out that they're not there in the community, that they're not available to women and children, and that they will be continuing to be involved in the range of work that they were involved in previously, although potentially at a different level. We need to re-engage with them following the decisions that have been made around the Delivering Equally Safe Fund, because those decisions will impact on their plans as individual organisations. But clearly it is up to them about how much detail they share with us around those plans. We will certainly be keeping the links open and are open to discussion about those. In relation to the links with ORA, no, we have since, and the original sort of transition discussions were ongoing, where there were some questions raised about the support that ORA was offering, offered to facilitate. So that was following the transition arrangements you're referring to. And the answer was that they didn't feel that that was necessary at the time, or they could make the link directly themselves. But again, that's an open offer. Both parties are mature enough to be sitting round the table in some of the structures and some of the meetings that I've talked about before, and will work jointly together. And we certainly are, whilst obviously as our Commission service, we will be routing from a council perspective referrals for support to ORA when that makes sense. If a woman chooses and wants to be referred to Women's Aid, we are happy to make that referral, or for she can also self-refer to Women's Aid, and that message is very clear. And similarly, there will be instances where Women's Aid or Assist are already involved in supporting a woman or a family, and we wouldn't necessarily be looking to change that. Ultimately, it's about working together as part of a whole system to try and tackle domestic abuse. And if there's more people involved in that, the better. It gives us more resource to tackle the challenges in North Lanarkshire.
Thanks very much, Alison, for that. Fiona, do you have a supplementary?
I do. I feel a bit like devil's advocate here, and I don't want to be, because it's a fine tightrope. I have been contacted by the 3 Women's Aid groups, and I do have text here from them. So it's maybe better that, just to be transparent, that I kind of put their point of across in their language, so that, and then if it can be followed up in future reports, then I would be grateful of that, just to make sure we have a clean slate and we are making sure that there is discussions happening. The Women's Aid are stating that they feel as if they've been actively engineered out of the partnership, and North Lanarkshire Council have introduced a blanket instruction to all statutory agencies that all domestic abuse cases have to be referred via ORA. So I know that you're saying different, Alison, so it's just to put that's how they feel, and that's what they've stated. Women's Aid workers are also reporting that at a local level this is causing duplication and confusion for the women who are already being supported by Women's Aid and they feel poached by NLC and redirected to ORA. And they confirm here that they have not been approached regarding any discussing partnership workings. They last approached NLC to discuss services following the last committee meeting, and the last meeting that they took place was the 21st of June. Now, I'm not here to say right or wrong, I'm just there putting that out there to obviously maybe get some answers to ensure that conversation is taking place. Because I note in the recommendations that they plan to progress the wider partnership strategy and to drive forward improvement. Obviously, we all welcome that, and fundamentally, the priority group here is the users of the group, so it's ensuring that they have the appropriate service. So it would be really good to, in that future report, have more information in there about further dialogue that's maybe taking place to maybe readdress these meetings, or maybe get these meetings up and running again, because Women Aid don't have any funding except what has came through the Equally Safe Fund. So it's just that if we can give them a helping hand so that they can distinguish their roles within this new service or this partnership that obviously we're referring to, then anything we know, we'd be really grateful. Thank you.
Okay, I mean, I think Alison is covered effectively the position of the service, and I thought was quite helpful in you know, spelling out the various discussions and attempted meetings that have been that the service has sought to facilitate. Obviously, I think the words that were used were, you know, an open door to these sort of discussions taking place in the future, and I'm confident that the service will continue to have engagement as Women's Aid are part of the partnership arrangements that we have in place. Alison, I don't know if you want to get, I mean, I don't want you to repeat yourself. Maybe something to consider for future meetings, just in terms of how we sort of move forward with any discussions or meetings that are taking place, if you're comfortable with that position.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy. I would need to check my dates in terms of the last formal meetings, but I suppose there's meetings that have been specific in relation to the change process, but there's also ongoing meetings as part of the partnership structure. And for example, the review of MARAC arrangements that we talked about earlier has very explicitly involved both Women's Aid and ORA, and we're very clear that Women's Aid have a place in that where they're involved, that, you know, unless a woman chooses to change who their support provider is, and some women are supported by EVA or Assist, not by either Women's Aid or ORA, then that's you know, we will stream. There's an agreement about how across partners about how that work will be streamed, but ultimately there is choice for people, and that's very clear, and Women's Aid and ORA are both party to that. So I'm happy to take any specific questions, Councillor Fotheringham, and come back to you about that out with the meeting if that's helpful. But certainly the open door message is clear.
Thanks very much, Alison. Councillor Barclay.
Thanks, Frank. Again, it's such an important report that's coming to us, and I think that throughout it all and through what my colleague has said and everything that you said, Alison, it's about the users of this that are the important people, and it's to make sure that the system that's in place is there for everyone who needs it. So I'm heartened with it, but the only question that I've got is under the recommendations, it's saying that a further update will be provided in 6 months. Now, I'm loath to give, I know the amount of work you've got on, Alison, so I'm just looking at why there's a time scale of 6 months rather than at the next committee. Is it because it's going to take 6 months before there would be further information to give to us? Can it come to us in the next committee cycle? You know, just as how long, looking at those time scales, if you can kind of give me some information on that one.
So the 6 months would revert to the original timescales that we had programmed as part of the programme of work. We obviously brought an extra work report forward last time at committee's request. And clearly, if there's significant new developments, that's something that we can do again, or there's a specific ask. The reason that it was suggested as 6 months this time is really to let new arrangements bed in. Some of the improvement activity that we've outlined here will not progress massively within 3 months, so it gives a better opportunity of getting something substantive back to committee next time. And also, I suppose very specifically, the restructure of the partnership arrangements and the development of a partnership strategy is likely to take that period of time. So that's why the suggestion was 6 months. But I will be directed by committee on that. If there's a desire for information sooner, an update can be provided.
I mean,
can I come back on that, Frank?
Yeah, absolutely.
I wouldn't want the amount of workload and everything you've got. What I don't want is you just have to make a report for a report's sake, because that we would say we want something in 3 months. I'm reassured by you, Alison, that if there was, and also convener through yourself, that if there was anything to tell us, that you would bring it back to us in the 3 month cycle rather than waiting 6 months. And I'm more than content with that.
Absolutely. I mean, you certainly have that assurance. I think Alison had stated that in her response to you there, and you have that assurance from myself. I think the point about allowing the arrangements to bed in is an important one there, and I think that needs to be allowed to happen over the course of the next few cycles. Councillor Mooney.
Thanks very much, convener. I apologise for background noise. As you can hear, Guitar Hero's going on up the stairs with his online lesson. Just the question I have is about section 2.4, if possible, where the Mentors in Violence programme is going to be rolled out across North Lanarkshire schools. You know, I really welcome this, and I would really be interested in citing the actual programme and finding out a bit more about it beforehand. You know, I see a lot of incidents of domestic violence because of my other day job, working in a general practice, and a lot of the domestic abuse that we see is very low level, that maybe perhaps children and young adults wouldn't necessarily recognise it as being domestic abuse, where there's controlling aspects, where mothers are not allowed out on their own, they're told what to wear, they're told what to do, and perhaps children might not recognise this as a form of abuse. And by highlighting this in the schools to them, you know, I'm just worried about what their reactions will be during the school day if they see this, and the realisation that their mothers or their sisters or whoever, or even potentially their fathers, might be subject to this form of domestic abuse. So I'd be keen to find out what kind of support we're going to have immediately after the sessions for perhaps the children and young adults that are going through this, because my concern is, yeah, it's great to highlight it and to make them aware of it, but we've also got to have immediate support there, because there may be kids having been involved in this programme that will be immediately upset on the realisation that their family are currently undergoing that. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Nora. I mean, the mentors and violence prevention programme is fairly well established in the majority of our secondary schools, and you know, there are many young people who are actively engaged in that, and I think it is an important point within the report 2.4 that you know, that is the intention is to expand that into the senior primary cohort as well. Alison, do you maybe want to touch on the concerns that were raised by Councillor Mooney?
Convener, I suppose just to reinforce what you say, it's a well-established programme that has national support and review, so it does have support built in, and I suppose it's also whilst certainly some of the issues that may emerge as children's individual experiences at home during that, and teaching staff and others are briefed as part of that programme in terms of how to respond to that. I think the other thing that the programme really addresses is it's an empowering programme for young people, which helps them look at how to address, I suppose, concerns in terms of attitudes and behaviours that they see round about them in as safe a way as possible. So it's as much about you know, how they relate to each other, supporting healthy peer relationships, etc., as it is around them reflecting on domestic abuse within their own home situations. But it is a well-established model which has the support built round about it. And I don't know if any of my colleagues from education want to say any more about that, Gerard, or anyone else in relation to the experience of how it works in schools. But there is positive support built in.
Thanks very much, Alison. I don't know if any of the if any of the other heads. Derek, do you want to say something?
All I can say to you about the Mentors and Violence Prevention Programme, in my experience of talking to the young people, and actually, Convener, you yourself in meeting some of the young people you've met in your role, have found them to be very powerful champions of that programme and have been great advocates for it. And we have some fantastic practice in some of our schools. And I think that the trainers that we have access to are very committed to rolling out through all the schools, and we can kind of lock this up into some of the other leadership type activity we're bringing forward this year, the enrichment activities we're bringing through the changes to the school week that we've made, etc. But absolutely think it's a very powerful programme. And there are numerous examples of young people who can talk and advocate much more powerfully than I can on the subject, but it's definitely something that we're critically interested in pursuing further.
Thanks very much for that. I see no further questions or comments on this paper. I'll be happy to read the recommendations. Thank you very much. Takes us on to agenda item number 11, which is an update on the summer activity programme, and specifically Club 365. Gerard McLaughlin and Anne Monroe are here, who were both involved in the delivery of the programme. I'll ask Anne if she can take us through the report at this point. Anne?
Thank you very much, Convener, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for the opportunity to present the paper. The report which you have, and I know that you have read it, provides you with details of the Club 365 Summer Activity Programme, and it references the evaluation of the programme, which was conducted at the end of the summer activity period and has been helping to inform future delivery. I would like to highlight from the introduction the very extensive partnership working, and I would say that was across services and partners. And I really also want to highlight and to reference the funding, which you'll see noted within the paper, which has come from existing Club 365 budget and Scottish Government grants, details of which are included in the report and specifically in Appendix A. In terms of the background, I won't go through the paper, but I would like to highlight just a number of key points from within it. The background provides important context to the programme, particularly in relation to the development and implementation of the Club 365 programme over a number of years, the amended programme based on the introduction of vouchers for families during the COVID emergency period, and the further development and implementation of a much more extended programme as part of the summer activity programme, starting on the 25th of June, running right through to the end of the summer holiday. Again, I've already referenced finance, but you'll see within the report the funding is referenced as the core funding from North Lanarkshire budgets and specific Scottish Government grants, including the Scottish Attainment Challenge Fund and additional funding for targeted summer holiday activities. Section 2 of the report provides some of the detail which Alison has referenced already in her report, particularly around the key interventions. The first one that's highlighted in the report is specifically relating to the Club 365, what we described as the primary programme, which was 18 hubs. And you'll see from the attendance figures there, the snapshot in the first part of section 2, and then the further detail in the appendices. It shows significantly higher attendance than previously. The total daily average of attendance was 430 pupils. In terms of the report, it also highlights significant work which was done around 6 specialist ASN hubs. First time they've operated on a scale such as this. And again, it's important in this one here to highlight not just the attendance, but one thing I do want to draw attention is stakeholder group. I can see my connection starting to go, so I'm hoping I can stay through, and if I don't manage, I'll need to sort of whiz through quickly. Hopefully you can still hear me. In terms of the role of the stakeholder group, really important, they worked with us every single week throughout the programme, and the Parent Council chairs were very, very effective in helping us to refine and direct the programme as it was progressing. Also want to reference some of the intensive programme. Strathclyde Park summer activity offer for our P7 pupils. Really, really valuable intensive outdoor learning there. The intensive offer that Alison has referenced from the virtual school aimed at our care experienced young people, including our kinship groups, and Alison has referenced in detail there the additional bespoke packages available as part of it. Also want to highlight the bespoke offer by New College Lanarkshire, a very strong vocational offer there, and 107 pupils were involved. And also the pupil activity passes, over 10,000 activity passes were distributed and almost 4,000 activities were booked, and you'll see the detail within the report. Want to highlight community learning and development, again a very comprehensive programme of summer projects, much of which built on existing very strong CLD programmes. And also just overall to highlight, there were over 26,000 pupil engagements in the Club 365 summer activity programme during that period. I want to acknowledge, and again it's important to do so, the work of our third sector provision and 4 of our sites. And also you'll see in terms of the report there some additional information which shows, even although this was not stigmatising young people, we're clear to avoid that. We weren't targeting children, but you will see that the reach of the programme extended very much into children and young people from our most deprived areas. As a result of the programme, and very much the ask was to do an initial evaluation. We did it immediately at the end of the programme so that we could get a response for committee, and you'll see the analysis in Appendix D, which our researchers conducted. And also just to provide you with a further update in terms of next steps. We're in the 4th week of our delivery of our re-established Club 365 weekend programme, and we are currently progressing through a procurement programme. In terms of communications, a lot of communications was very much focus of the work that we were doing, but we have continued our engagement with the Scottish Government around the summer activity programme. Most recently, I participated in a round table discussion towards the end of August, and feedback from Scottish Government was very positive about the programme that we had developed, and we are continuing to engage with them. Further meetings scheduled for next week. Would also highlight that throughout the programme, ongoing monitoring of risk in order to provide reassurance to members, very much related to COVID expectations around risk registers, around all of the assessments that you would expect, was a feature of our daily meetings with the team. Finally, just to highlight that the report is for noting, but can I just draw your attention specifically to noting the financial forecasting, that we are progressing with the framework for procurement for Club 365, the evaluation report, and we are continuing to work with stakeholders in terms of our evaluation at this stage. And also note that following Gold Command approval earlier in the period, we have resumed our Club 365 offering and are currently planning for September and October. Thank you very much indeed, Convener. Myself and Gerard would be happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much for that report, Anne. Councillor Wilson is the first in the chat bar. Nathan?
Thank you, Convener. There's a couple of brief questions I want to ask. Section 2.11.1 in page 179 shows that almost a third of young people who attended the Club 365 summer programme do not live in an SIMD 1 to 4 area. I was just looking for some clarification on whether the council intends to continue with this approach in future, and if the intention is to make Club 365 more widely available to all children going forward. On a further point, Appendix B shows that attendance has sometimes fluctuated quite markedly in particular days at the summer hubs from the 25th of July to the 11th of August. The data presented in the table highlights that in some days at the various hubs, attendance has been in single figures or in the low teens, but in others it's been up to 4, 5, 6 plus times higher. I would just be interested to know if officers have any understanding of why there has been this fluctuation with attendance significantly lower on some days compared to the higher figures for others. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much, Nathan. I'll bring Anne in a couple of points. I mean, I think I understand the point that you're raising around the SIMD data, but the overwhelming majority of people, young people who attended, were from SIMD deciles 1 to 3. I mean, you're talking close to 60%. So, I mean, I think we just need to put that into a bit of perspective. Anne, can you pick up on the comments that Councillor Wilson's raised?
Yes, thanks very much, Councillor Convener, and thank you very much, Councillor Wilson, for your questions. Yes, in terms of the Club 365 being more widely available, as I referenced in the report, Councillor Wilson, very good comments there from you. This was not specifically a targeted provision, but we were keen as part of our analysis to have a look at where the youngsters came from, the young people and the children, and we did that analysis based on a snapshot of 2 days attendance. In terms of the existing Club 365 provision, the provision at the moment, as I know will be very aware, as outlined in committee, is very much aimed at children and young people who are eligible for free school meals. However, we have not, and it hasn't been our intention to turn any children away from Club 365. In terms of your second question, again, this is something that the tactical team worked on every day, really looking at monitoring attendance, and officers from across the services who were involved in this really did drill down and analyse the work of each of the hubs, what was happening, what was going on, and it was very difficult just to predict what was going to happen in each particular hub. And it was interesting when we went back out to the children and the young people in terms of our evaluation to see if they were able to give us any further indication around this. Feedback, again, as you'll see, was very positive. They liked the venues of the hubs, they generally liked the activities, but as part of our analysis at the end, we've been working with the tactical team in looking at what activities we could be providing in order order to ensure that we are supporting and meeting the needs of young people. So it did vary, and it varied right across the piece. And sometimes we adapted in order to respond to any of those changes. I'm not sure, Councillor Wilson, if you want me to come back again, or if there's anything that Gerard would want to add in terms of those two aspects.
No, thanks very much for that, and that was detailed and very constructive, and thank you for answering the point raised.
Thanks, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Councillor Barclay, Claire.
Okay, thanks, Frank. Thanks again for a really good report. If more, a couple of comments rather than questions. I totally agree. It's really difficult to predict the number of children that we're going to turn up on each day, and I think on the whole, it's actually that was really dealt with well. I'm really glad to see the evaluation and being able to move forward on that and taking on board exactly what the children were saying, what they liked, what they didn't like, what they would like. I think that's really, really good. Main thing that I want to really thank you all, and thank the team behind this was the ESN part of it. The feedback I was getting from parents and carers was that this, in a way, was a godsend for them, for the fact that it got the children back into some sort of routine where they were seeing their friends, they were back in the environments, and in a way it was giving them some breathing space, but also it worked because of the discussions that were happening with the carers, the parents, the parent councils, the teachers, and the children themselves. So really is to thank everybody that's involved in that. And really, from me, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks very much for those comments, Claire, and I think as Anne had highlighted in the report, the discussions will continue to take place with the ESN stakeholder group that's been established, and that will continue moving forward. Councillor Kelly, Paul.
Thanks, Convener. I think this report actually underlines just how hugely successful the North Lanarkshire Summer Programme has been. I think without doubt the most successful summer programme for young people in Scotland. And it's thanks to Club 365 being well established that we've had this established over previous years, that we're able to build on it, and it's a fantastic report. And I echo what Claire has said around thanks to all the staff involved, everybody involved in operating it and running it, and making it so successful. Just obviously there was additional Scottish Government funding came in, which helped. There's no doubt at all helped with sort of adding to what we provide with Club 365. Has there been any discussion or dialogue with the Scottish Government around other holidays in terms of going forward, like September weekend, October holidays, Christmas, etc., about this more additional funding coming from the Scottish Government? Because I think that would be quite helpful. I know you've got a meeting on the 24th of September with them, and I don't know if that's going to be part of it, or is it just going to be a reflection of the success of the programme? Because that additional funding, I've got to say, and I'm not being political, is very important when you see the budget cuts that come to councils all the time. So these little bits of money can help when given. So it's just to see if the Scottish Government have any plans to continue to support holiday programmes like this. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Paul. Anne, I mean, obviously you've got your meeting in a week's time. I don't know if Thomas maybe wants to comment from a financial point of view on your question, Paul. I'll bring Anne in first, and then perhaps Thomas will want to pick up on any of the points that you've raised.
Thanks very much, Convener, and thank you, Councillor Kelly. The meeting is scheduled for the 24th of September, as I've mentioned there, and I've not had clarification yet on what the agenda will be for that one, Councillor Kelly. So I think it would be helpful if Thomas is able to come in at this point, in case there's any further information that Thomas is able to share with.
Thomas?
Thanks, Convener. As of today, we don't have any further information that equivalent funding will be made available all the periods through the end of the financial year. Obviously, the government is reviewing the programmes that councils have been running over the summer, and possibly when Anne meets some of the civil servants, we may get an update on that. What I'll do, Councillor Kelly, if there is any further information from the government, obviously I'll make you aware as soon as I can that funding has come in. But as we speak, there's no confirmation that equivalent funding will be made available during the rest of this financial year's holiday periods. But as I say, we'll update as soon as we can.
Thanks very much, Thomas. Councillor Mooney? Nora?
Thanks very much, convener. It's actually a question. First of all, great report, and by the way, what a range of activities for the kids over the summer holidays. Absolutely amazing, I have to say. But I have got a specific question with regards to the Thornywood ward. I'm referring to page 185 where there's Appendix B, and looking at the figures in the first couple of weeks, there was a massive uptake in the 365, especially the second week, obviously, which is when the summer holidays really started to establish itself. In one day, 75 children attending, was at its peak. But then the decision was taken to move it to another school because of capacity. And immediately, the amount of children attending dropped. And it continued in that trend until it moved to the next school and it dropped again. I'm sure it's the same in other areas where the provision has been moved, in other areas where the area is huge. But for children to go from Birkinshaw up to St John Paul II Primary, it's about 1.5 miles away on a very busy main road. And there's no way that parents would allow their children to go up there on their own accord. During the holidays, whereas sending them up to a local sports barn, walking up a couple of local streets is absolutely acceptable. And I suppose my question is why it was decided at the last minute to move them. I take it must have been capacity, but I would hope that somebody would look at this next year and reassess it and maybe base it at Birkinshaw Sports Barn on an ongoing basis, because the huge amount of numbers of the children that attended were at the Birkinshaw Sports Barn. And it's difficult to say whether those children actually moved up to John Paul II, because I would suspect that a vast majority of them didn't, and the children that actually attended John Paul II were the ones that then stayed local to John Paul II, which is 1.5 miles away. Perhaps the children that weren't going down to Birkinshaw then attended there. I suspect that perhaps if there'd been 2 venues in our local area, that the uptake would have been even higher again. Anyway, so just really to be reassured that this will be looked at for next year, that perhaps Birkinshaw will be considered as a hub, because that's where the biggest uptake was. And notably, at the weekend, there was still 10 children attended both venues, whereas when it was changed, that dropped significantly again. Anyway, thank you.
Thanks very much, Nora. I'll bring Gerard in on this one. Gerard was involved. To put him on the spot, was involved in this at the time, and there were mitigating circumstances. Gerard, do you want to come in on the points that Councillor Mooney's raised?
Yeah, thanks, convener. Councillor Mooney, I absolutely see the points you're making. Obviously, it was a great success in that particular setting. However, as you can see in the report, we had a tactical meeting every single morning to monitor the numbers that were coming in. But bear in mind, we've got health and safety that are sitting in that group early in the morning, and what they are starting to flag up, along with the staff who are saying that the specific facility that was there could no longer safely meet the needs of the children and young people. And what they said was we needed space, and we needed a place, obviously, for the children to have their breaks and for their snacks. So we did look at a second venue, and I know it's disappointing that we went to a third. The reason why I couldn't go to the alternative one was there was work getting carried out there, so we had to go to John Paul II as an interim measure before we could go to the last one, because we felt the last one was the better venue as far as distance was concerned. I take on board the points you're making. We just don't change the settings just because, but we have to make sure that the staff and the pupils, most importantly, are safe. And if we're getting the feedback that this isn't safe, we have to obviously do something about it. And your final point, yes, of course, we'll consider this. It's so hard, as we've heard in this meeting, to actually judge the actual numbers that are going to be in each setting. However, we do need to react to any risks that we see in there. But moving forward, if we're asked to do this again, of course, we'd look for a more sustainable and appropriate setting for the children and young people in that particular area.
I mean, I think it is important to say that, you know, the number of young people accessing the hubs, I think, is Claire and Paul touched on, was at times took everybody by, I think it took everybody by surprise, especially early on, that there was so much interest from families to access the hubs, and it was important that those tactical meetings took place because it allowed the service to react when there were situations, as was the one presented at Birkinshaw Sports Barn with the sheer number of people that were coming in. I noted your point, Nora, about you know, creating a second hub or whatever. We could have probably done that in a whole range of communities, created multiple hubs. Obviously, there is a council position in relation to Club 365, and we don't have an unlimited resource to be able to deliver you know, double the amount of hubs, for example. So I mean, I think we just need to bear that in mind as well. I'll bring you back in a supplementary. I see you put that in the chat, so I'll bring you in, if it's okay with Willie, I'll bring you in before I bring Councillor Goldie in.
Thanks very much, Frank. I really appreciate it. And I know it's not an easy job to make these decisions. And again, under data protection and GDPR, etc., it's kind of impossible to take information on where these kids are coming from in order to make sure that the provision's been put where it's most needed. And it's such a shame that we can't do that, because, you know, if we knew, for example, that out of that 75, that 60 were from Birkinshaw, then we would have known then that that's where the most need was. But it is an area of high deprivation in which my ward is. So if there were ever additional funds, then maybe 2 hubs would be very much appreciated. But I do appreciate that council funds are very stretched. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Nora. Willie?
It's really just congratulations on the ESA, and also just positivity and about getting it right in the right place. The numbers at Cumbernauld Primary School are absolutely fantastic. It's something that we discussed at the start of the progress, and I think the Parent Council bought into it well and sold it well for the pupils of the area. There was an issue that we were concerned that they might not engage on it. But it has been tremendous. The numbers back it up, and it has been well appreciated by the community. And hopefully, you know, we continue this in the future. And just an appeal that in future years, if we can look at older pupils as well, for maybe facilities within their local area. I know there's indications that there was stuff at Cumbernauld College, but we had a number of people who had primary school kids and secondary school kids and said it was fantastic. The primary school kids had plenty to do, but the secondary school kids didn't have as much to do, and the locations weren't great. But that's all for the future. But great this year, and particularly thanks for the Cumbernauld Primary.
Thanks very much for those comments, Willie. Certainly will be taken on board by the officers. I don't see any further questions at this point. Are we happy to agree the recommendations that are outlined? Thank you very much, colleagues. That takes us on to our next agenda item, which is the Armed Forces Covenant. You'll see this on page 201. This is a paper for noting. It's been presented here today. Alan Henry is on the call. I'll ask if there are any questions on this paper, and Alan will be happy to answer them. Are there any questions from members on this this paper about the Armed Forces Covenant? Okay, thanks very much, colleagues. I'll be happy to agree with the report. Thank you very much. Takes us on to agenda item number 13, which is the Revenue Budget Monitoring Report. This is obviously a standard report that we get every cycle. Thomas is here to talk us through the main points within the report, and Thomas, I'll hand over to you at this point.
Okay, thanks, convener. This is the Services Revenue Monitoring Report to the period ending 23rd of July, which is accounting period 4. As discussed earlier in the meeting, there is still significant activity within the service linked to COVID, with forecast costs and funding of £24 million highlighted in Appendix 6. This position remains fluid and will be kept under ongoing review, with updates reflected in future reports. Similar to last year, the service has made arrangements to ensure that individual educational establishments will not bear the responsibility for in-year COVID costs. The report highlights that within the remainder of the service, there is an anticipated net underspend of £627,000 through to financial year end. The main contributor to the outturn position is underspends within early years budgets, partly offset by increased transport and property costs, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Thomas. I see there are a couple of questions in the chat bar. I'll come to Councillor Johnson first. Tom, over to you.
Thanks, Frank. My questions are mainly about the actual underspends that are taking place. There's an awful lot of money shifting around, COVID money coming in, underspend floating about, planned savings, of which a lot of are deferred savings, and then we've got management action as well, covering some of the actual savings. So it's out of this one or two questions. Paragraph 2.2.1, employee underspend of 3.657 million in the early years. How has this happened? Because my question is why you'd worked out that there's less pupils involved in the 1140 enterprise than you originally thought. So what happened there? Did you get extra money from the Scottish Government that's now actual slack? And why was it that you've got less pupils than you had planned for? Do you want the other questions just now?
If you don't mind, Tom.
Okay. The other questions would be paragraph 2.2.8, where you talk about it's actually the word ongoing is used. Demand pressures on ASN transport, 1.6 million. Now the word ongoing is there. As I recall, the latest ASN figures are about 26% of children, if I'm correct. And about a few years ago, it was about 9%. The proportion of ASN pupils is going up. And is there any comment to be made on whether this is likely to go up further than the 26%, if I've got that figure correct? Are we reaching a peak there? The other questions were under management action, which comes into paragraph 2.5.1. Vacancy management, that's a sort of traditional method. I suppose that'll just be as tough as usual. I was interested in the one efficiencies through use of grants, external funding. Is that the use of things like PEF for internal NLC usage, that sort of thing? Is it? I don't know if it's misuse, but is it use of grants meant for other things being used?
Tom, sorry, I need to stop you. I can't let you. I can't let you use words like misuse.
All right, I'll take that back.
In relation to the paper that's been presented by the service.
Right. Well, what I want to know is what that means. Efficiencies through use of grant external funding. The other couple of questions are the actual management expenditure and how tough will this be? Reconfiguration of the school week. So I take it this has been deferred. I think the idea here was Friday afternoons off, etc. I wanted to know about, we're now going to stop the merging and rezoning of school catchment areas. Digital classrooms are going to be halted. That seems to be quite a blow given the massive changes that are taking place, and the secondary school library situation. If there's any comments on these actual actions that are proposed.
Well, I mean, okay, thanks, Tom. I mean, I think on the 32 period week, that is progressed and is in is taking place just now. You might have seen it in some of your schools. Some excellent work that's going on in terms of the rollout of the 32 period week. You raised a couple of points there. I'll bring Thomas in on. I think it was your first point, and then Gerard can maybe touch on the early learning and childcare, and Derek can maybe just give a wee bit of clarity around what is meant, or Thomas, in terms of 2.5.1b, which is in relation to the efficiencies through the grants and external funding section. Thomas, do you want to maybe give a response to the first point?
Thanks, convener. And as I say, I'll touch on all four of the main points that have been raised. In terms of the joining together of Scottish Government and Council funding, we've just come off a paper which gives an example of this in relation to Club 365 and the summer programme. And because we've taken the decision to actually build upon Club 365, what we haven't done is create two management structures to overview those programmes. And that's the type of approach that whenever additional government money has come in recent years, we have actively, or the service has actually tried to make sure that if they have a solution or a skill set within the service, that skill set is used rather than incurring additional overhead costs, such as recruiting additional admin or management staff. And in terms of that approach, that's been signed off with the Scottish Government, and quite often government grant will come with an allowance of admin costs, and that's the approach that we will take. We will pass them on rather than recruiting new staff, and that saves the government money, and it allows us to maximise the use of our existing staff and resources. So that's an example of where you draw out synergies if you do receive additional grant currently. In terms of the savings that have been deferred, these savings were flagged up in a previous committee report, and the reason that specific savings have been deferred is purely linked to COVID and the government's and the services' ambition that they can re-establish all educational services as best they can. And again, for example, in terms of the school librarians, that was a saving that was originally planned to be implemented in August of this year. But the Scottish Government in various grant letters and communications clearly highlighted that all educational staff had to be retained through the re-establishment of educational services. And that's the reason why that saving has been deferred by 1 year. And similarly with all the other savings that have been deferred, that is purely in relation to ensure that our children have got the best experience they can returning to school after COVID. Moving on to the ASN transport costs, as a historic issue, that the ASN transport costs have been higher than the budget allocation for several years. That situation is actively getting looked at through the Council's ASN board, and it is one of the recommendations through the Member Officer Working Group that we eventually get all the ASN budgets into a balanced position. So in terms of achieving that, the service is looking at a number of transport initiatives to determine and see if we can bring down our transport costs. And if that is not possible to bring down all the transport overspends linked to ASN, there will be another solution brought forward through the Council's budget setting process to make sure that, as I say, these overspends can get managed in future years. So that has been specifically getting looked at the moment, but it has been an ongoing pressure within this Council and all other councils, because as you rightly said, the number of ASN pupils that are presenting are going up each year. And I'm trying to remember what the first question was. Yeah, in terms of 1140, We have been very transparent when we've brought papers forward linked to 1140. We have highlighted that the levels of government grant that we've received and the fact that on occasions the annual government grant we've received has been in excess of actually service delivery that's required. That's the reason we have an early years reserve that's been created. And specifically in terms of pupil numbers, we have maintained the grant level within the current year's budget, but it's acknowledged that those pupil numbers, which were government estimates and they were government planning tools from 5 or 6 years ago, we have maintained that budget so that if those pupils did present, we would be able to provide them with an early years place. What will happen now, that this is the first year of full implementation, part of that resource will be recirculated within the wider council and wider education service, because it's clearly not needed to the levels that were originally anticipated by the government 5 or 6 years ago. And that is already part of the council's medium-term financial planning process. So as I say, we have been very transparent in terms of the grant that we've received. That builds on the existing early years budget we've had. But clearly, as I say, we don't need that full budget level going forward. The service is aware of it, the council's finance service is aware of it, and that's already built into financial planning assumptions going forward. But what we've wanted to do is be very transparent to committee to highlight all of that grant that has come in, and we've done that since year one of the 1140 programme. And my final point before I move off of 1140, in terms of the planning assumptions that the government used, these are getting revisited. This is the last year of the first grant funding model the government has had, and it's likely that some of these planning assumptions will change in the future grant awards that the government offer councils going forward, and those new grant offers will start from the next financial year. I hope I've covered all of the points, but again, if there's anything I've missed, I'm happy to come back.
Thanks very much, Thomas. I think that is a fairly comprehensive overview of the diligent steps that the service and our financial colleagues have taken over many years. So thanks very much for that. Tom, I think I don't see you want a supplementary, so that's fine. Councillor Castles, Tom?
Just to say, just if I could add, my queries about the ASN transport were simply about the word ongoing and whether the budget was within reasonable control. That was all. It wasn't objecting to rising. Thanks.
So, sorry, I think you cut out there at the end, Tom. I don't know if there's anything you want to add, Thomas.
Yes, it was just to say that I wasn't objecting to the cost of ASN transport.
Tom, I heard you. It was just I was asking if Thomas, if Thomas had any sort of anything else he wanted to add to that specific point that you've raised there.
Yep, and it's just to reiterate, Convener, there's a significant amount of work, planning work ongoing to determine what the long-term transport ask will be and to ensure we have a sustainable funding solution for that. And as I say, I can make that commitment that work is ongoing.
Thanks very much. Tom Castles.
Thanks, Chair. Just to take it back to 2.4.2, I know it was touched on about the savings reflected in the change in the academic year. I don't know if that was developed, if there are savings actually outside of the cost active Friday, if there are actually savings within the week. But the main point I wanted to raise was that under that unachieved saving of just in excess of 1.2 million, and it's going to be taken over by the new staffing structures. It's just to get information on that. First of all, how will that be achieved? Immediately comes into my mind is a merger of posts, or perhaps non-statutory posts being unfilled, or early retirement. Is it something in that line? And secondly, what will the process of that be? How will stakeholders, like if parents are affected, how will they be kept in the loop? How will teachers be kept in the loop? How will the trade unions be kept in the loop? And in fact, how will the elected members be kept in the loop? as this progresses, if it's touching on particular areas or establishments within their areas socially? What will the aim of this be, and how will it be progressed?
Okay, thanks, Tom. Thomas?
Yep, so I'll give an example. In terms of the 32 period week, what has been agreed is a partial rephasing of the achievement of that saving. The saving will be achieved in future years. It is only a partial rephasing. We've indicated the service is taking management action in the current year to make sure that they do remain within their overall budget resources. So when we're talking about temporary delays, it does tend to reflect the fact that, as I say, it's staffing decisions that will simply be delayed for a period of time. It's quite normal when services have staffing savings to implement, that they don't always get achieved per the specified date, and that's because as a council we do undertake quite a lot of consultation with staff groups, trade union groups, etc. before these savings are brought in. So they do tend to be in-year staffing delays. In this case, the service has been very clear that there's been sort of 3 savings clearly highlighted and flagged that will be delayed by up to a year. Other staffing savings, as I say, it's temporary delays, and the actual saving hopefully will be drawn out between now and March. So hopefully that gives a bit of reassurance that, as I say, these savings will be achieved, and as I say, it's just temporary delays.
Tom, are you happy with that?
I was asking more about what the process would be, what we'll be looking for as these are implemented, who will be affected by it, and how will we be kept informed as that implementation takes place.
Okay, Derek, do you maybe want to come in on this one? Just obviously that maybe to provide a wee bit wider context on that point.
Yeah, I've kind of listened with interest and thank Thomas for his answers. You understand the service has been pretty seriously affected by COVID, and an awful lot of the things we were trying to do have been, kind of knocked off course just because of circumstances and all the different kind of things we've been coping with. For example, you can have underspends because you don't have kids in school for quite a long period of time, or in early years establishments for a long period last year, over 6 months of the last financial year. So that's something that I think we all just need to accept. And I wouldn't think that members should be surprised by the detail in this report. We did bring a report which was agreed by this committee in May that asked for your approval to rephase the 3 savings that Thomas has mentioned. And there's been loads of information provided of the type that's sought here today by Councillor Castles in previous budget sounding boards and kind of briefings for elected members of all parties, and there's been very detailed information about how we'll go about things, and I can remind Councillor Castles of that offline. But what I would also say is everything we do is done closely in association with our trade union colleagues, and there is clear and transparent information at every stage about how we go about dealing with things, and all staff and any affected groups for any saving, whichever one it happens to be, and a number have been mentioned in this conversation, was subject to the council policies, and you can be absolutely assured that we will follow them absolutely directly, and I'm happy to provide more information for Councillor Castles offline.
Absolutely, but I have to say, if I was absolutely clear about the information about what was happening, I wouldn't be asking the questions, and I wouldn't have asked the questions continuously. That's why I'm asking it. I'm asking for more clarity about what the process is going to be and what the effects will be and what we will see happen as the implementation begins.
Okay, Tom, I mean, I think you've made your point. I think Derek has given a response here. Obviously, this is a report that comes, every cycle, and as has been referenced, that there has been, these points have been highlighted in the past. We have endured that and are continuing to endure a significant challenge in terms of service, but the appropriate steps will be taken, and obviously committee will be kept updated on that as we move forward. And if there are any specific points that any member has, they can raise those with the officers, and the officers will be happy to provide that information as they do when they appear in front of committee. So as Derek has made the offer there, he is happy to sit down with you to have a discussion with you on the specific point, any specific points that you may have on this matter. But be assured that the committee will be continued to be kept abreast of this moving forward, as it has been at previous meetings. So I don't see any further questions at this point. Are we happy to agree the recommendations? Okay, thanks very much. That takes us to our final agenda item this evening. We started in the afternoon, now we're in the evening, and that is agenda item number 14, which is the annual bad debt write-off exercise. This is a report that we get every year. It is in line with previous years, although there is some commentary on page 220. Are there any questions to Thomas on this report? No? Okay, well, thanks very much for your attendance, colleagues, and we'll see you at the next